Welcome to the Dougherty County Board of Commissioners meeting with your chairman, Christopher S. Cohilas. Your commissioners include, from District 1, Commissioner Ed Newsom. From District 2, Commissioner Victor Edwards. From District 3, Commissioner Clinton Johnson. From District 4, Commissioner Russell Gray. From District 5, Commissioner Gloria Gaines. And from District 6, Commissioner Anthony Jones. Also joining us is your County Administrator, Michael McCoy, Assistant County Administrator, Scott Addison, County Clerk, Joanne Ware, and County Attorney, Spencer Lee. Thank you for joining your Dougherty County Commission meeting.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Go ahead and call to order the Dougherty County Commission work session for October 25th, 2021. Note for the record that all commissioners are present and in person. First item of business for us to discuss are the minutes of the October 4th regular meeting and October 11th work session. Any comments, questions, or discussion on that item? There being none, we'll now move on to delegations. This is where the commission will hear comments on those items pertaining to Dougherty County for which a public hearing has not been held or scheduled. We ask everyone to be brief, to the point, and considerate of time for others. Our first delegation is the Dougherty County Board of Registration and Elections Chairman, Bishop Frederick Williams, who is present to request assistance with funding to utilize the Albany Civic Center for the 2022 election year for advanced voting. Good morning, Bishop. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning to everyone. Chairman and to the commission. I have a real easy task today, and that is to ask for some money for our sessions of voting for the 22 year. Last year, you see on this paper that we gave you from the Civic Center, we utilized the Civic Center as voting, and it was tremendously a good idea. We had great results. We had a good location. We had very few trouble with restrictions and keeping order. It was just altogether a good facility. Now, I've given you a handout on the cost of it and the days that was mandatory, which were 13 days. And as you can see, the calculations of what we paid out was, and I'll just run through it very quickly, $2,000 a day for 13 days, plus the changeover and the utilities and the cleaning staff all came up to about $34,000, $35,000. You can see there, this was for 13 days. Now, in the 22 election year, which is next year, we would like to require the Civic Center for the following dates, and the total amount of dates, mandated dates for these elections are 17. So it's slightly more, and as you know, 22 is a big election year. The general primary election is May 24th, 22. The advanced voting is Monday, May 2nd, Friday, May 2nd, and Saturday dates, May 7th and May 14th. Now, the general special elections is November 8th, 22, with advanced voting, Monday the 17th, Friday, November 4th, and Saturday, and October 22nd. So you see it moves up just a little bit. We are asking for your assistance in getting the Civic Center and getting it booked for our primary and general election in 2022. Keeping in mind that I will be meeting with the city also to see can we get them to compensate parts of this. But in my closing, one of the things I would like to say is that managing general elections and making sure all of the rules and the new mandates that has come down from the state, the Civic Center will be a valuable place. Like I said, I've been on this board right at 7 years and serving as chairman. We have not had as smooth of a year as we had last year, or this last cycle in the Albany Civic Center. So we are requesting that, you know, y'all find us some money to do this. Do you have any questions for me?
Understood. Commissioner Johnson?
Yes, sir. Yes, I do. Good morning, Bishop. How are you?
Good morning.
I want to commend you all, just, for getting ahead of this on this round. It feels better to be looking at it coming in from this end than suffering all the other pressures, during the election cycle. Are there any other costs associated, Dropbox, surveillance camera? I know the state changed the laws about how many drop boxes in the community.
As of now, our drop boxes will be 2, which we go back to the original drop box. There may be very low, if it's not included, security costs. One of the things that we've learned in general elections is that there are a lot of pop-ups, problems. Like we spent quite an amount of time trying to keep the order at the candy room, and then the space was so limited. So right now, as of now, maybe in security, but we're good with the state mandated, they moved the drop box from where we had 6. We won't need 6 again. So putting it in this place eliminated a lot of other small charges.
So you'll put a drop box maybe out front and
Yes.
over the Civic Center?
Yes.
Okay, so the Civic Center will be a location for a drop box?
Possibly. I don't want to say, I would have to check, but definitely out front.
Gotcha.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for getting ahead of it.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Jones?
Yes, sir. Good to be here.
We're going to split this thing down the middle with the city. They have voters as well who are going to be utilizing this thing, and I think it'll be just a good marriage if the city and the county would split this election thing down the middle. I mean, that it just makes good, from my standpoint, make good business sense to have them to share in this burden as well, share in this cost rather.
Well, it is our goal. We would love that to be a reality. We are pursuing that. I don't have an answer for the city because I haven't met with them yet.
Right, okay.
Certainly, that is what I'm pursuing.
Okay, good.
The board is pursuing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, good morning, Bishop, and welcome, and thank you again for all of your hard work on behalf of the citizens of Dougherty County.
You're welcome.
I do have to say that I appreciate the city for what they did the last time.
Yes.
It was their effort and their work that allowed us to be able to use that center before, so much appreciation to them. Do you think it's possible to find a grant that would address this need again? Because I believe that's what we used the last time. And certainly, now that there's grant money out there for COVID, and this is tied to COVID,
Yes.
trying to keep people safe and give them distance and safety. Before they could crowd into 125 a bit, but we can't crowd them in there now. So that's the reason for the Civic Center. So perhaps there is grant money out there now, and it would be wise on somebody's part to try to find grant money again, rather than using our scarce local resources. So I would ask our county administrator if he is aware of whether or not some of the money that we already have allocated through ARPA or some other resource could be tapped into, and whether or not there's time to actually look for it.
Yes, ma'am. ARP funding could be used for this purpose.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
One more question. I'll wait, Mr. Gray. Go ahead.
Does it require extra staff to hold elections at a larger venue like the Civic Center versus the Candy Room?
Yes, it does. Not many, but what happens, you have the capacity to get people in. You may have a little more staff inside and a little less outside. So it does kind of balance out. But yes, I would say That would be very marginal.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons the board wanted to get in front of this, as she was saying about grants and everything, I'm very much for that. And that is one of the things that, because it was such a good venue before, we wanted to start early enough to check all of those venues for grants or however we can get it funded. We just didn't want to wait till next year to start preparing at such a busy year. So I would say there will be some additional staff, because one of the things with the Civic Center, it requires a little more security.
You know, I think historically, until COVID and the line spacing requirements, that and the state system being down during some, I guess, more peak voting hours, there's never really been a problem with the candy room, and the cost is hard to beat when it's free because it's county owned. And so I look at just the general cost of our elections continuing to go up and up and up. They don't get bigger and bigger and bigger. As a matter of fact, we have fewer people in Dougherty County than we had in previous years. The staff isn't getting any bigger, and volunteers are harder and harder to find when it comes to managing voting, and there's more and more seemingly early voting days. So you have the opportunity to vote is more available than it's ever been. I just have I guess from a fiscal responsibility, it just seems that if you're looking at kind of a cost per vote or cost per turnout, this is a pretty big financial burden on the county for, let's face it, the presidential elections have the highest turnouts. Next year we'll have a gubernatorial election, so it'll be higher than average. But on average, with the primaries and your general voting cycles, it's just way more cost than we would have to pay to have a very smooth and successful early voting at the candy room. Parking's right next door. It's heated and cooled, and without COVID restrictions, you can actually put more people in the line and not really have a tail outside. So I just have a hard time continuing to fund more and more just for the cost of operating our elections. We're not getting any more people in to vote.
Well, I think what is essential here is that it's more than just the cost of running. There was a lot of other things that we handled as a board. There was a lot of controversy came up. There was a lot of little lawsuits. There was things going on. But mostly with the candy room, there was a lot of people exposed to the sun and exposed outside for great periods of time. And then we caught a lot of repercussions behind that. So it's a little bigger for, if you look at the totality of it, we had a greater turnout in numbers. We had a greater response from the entire community, and they felt the area was safer. So we had a lot of other things to consider. And with that, Commissioner, one of the things we have constantly been under is changing of laws and voters and how you vote and how you can and cannot, which produces a lot of more work and a lot of more space. When we were in the candy room last year, and the days that I would go by would be very uncomfortable because we would pack it as much as we could, and then we would still have elderly people and other people, even though we were trying to move them along. It's a lot what's happening out there. Then we had threats of shootings and different things, and specialty groups, and then you think about everybody is exposed right beside the road. There's no feet or footage away. Everything is right there. I agree that we've had some pretty good years with the candy room, but then you have to consider there's a couple precincts that is closing, has closed, has refused to reopen, which kind of make us have to take a different approach, not only for the people that vote, but for our staff that work, it can get pretty, you know, it can get kind of rough. So I want to just put that out there as you decide. But yes, sir.
But the issues last year were largely with people being outside for long periods of time. The duration of them being stagnant in line was based on outages from the Secretary of State's system, right?
Well, that was a part of it. The other part was special groups being out of compliance and having the opportunity to do things that shouldn't have been done. And we could not control it because the space and the footage all was just kind of running together with everything. So it was a little more than that. But yeah, COVID played a big part of it.
Well, I mean, 150 feet is 150 feet. The good thing about the Civic Center is it's 150 feet from the exterior of the building. The bad part about this is you can have a carnival in the parking lot at 151 feet with loudspeakers and tents and food and everything else, and you know that's fine. You can't do it at the Candy Room. It's kind of hard to get a circus on the corner without some permit to have it downtown.
So
You're right, but when we booked the Civic Center, we booked that to the rights not to have that going on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love for the entire Civic Center parking lot to just be kind of a free and clear zone. Let's just, everybody go vote, do your thing.
Okay.
You know, my biggest thing is the cost. Keeps going up and up, and we don't have.
Understood. Commissioner Johnson.
yes, sir. Thank you. Again, I commend your board. Mr. McCoy, do we have any funds left over from that last grant that you can recall?
That was with the elections board, and I think they spent every dime.
Every dime.
Okay.
Every dime. And we were trying to get tents and all this other stuff because like I said,
So as you all do increase the customer service
Yes.
In that department, I commend you all for that.
Thank you.
And people engagement, citizen engagement is what it's all about. So opening every avenue
Absolutely.
to have citizen engagement is very important to getting people out to vote. And whether there's a circus or fair or whatever going on, people do deserve the right to vote. And I apologize for any of the comments that seem to be leaning in a different direction.
Okay. All right, let's, here's where I sort of see this right now. We obviously are a little ways away from the next election. I do appreciate as well the fact we're being able to consider this now. If the past 4 years have taught me anything, is that there is no consistency in what environment you're going to find yourself in any given day and time, whether it's a tornado, a hurricane, COVID-19, or the most bizarre political environment in the history of the world. So what I would like to do, Mr. McCoy, has staff vetted this, and can we get sort of a recommended date for us to make an ultimate decision on this in conjunction with our other budgetary items? I am thankful this is the right way to do things in terms of getting a request well in advance so that everybody can consider it en masse as we're looking comprehensively at a budget for that year. So can staff come up with a recommendation about when we would need to address this in connection with our overall budget? And has staff already engaged with Bishop and the other representatives and the elections board?
We have been in contact with election staff regarding this matter. As Bishop mentioned, he will be talking to the city of Albany. Last time the county footed the bill with the grant, that is no longer available. And so it's our hope that the city would want to split this 50-50, and if that's the case, then yes, we will come back with a recommendation to fund our 50%.
Understood. All right. Very good. Thank you very much, Bishop Williams.
Thank you very much.
All right. Let's move on to the next delegation. Mr. Forey's here to talk to us about tiny homes. So let's do that.
Mr. Johnson,
Good morning, Chairman, Commissioners.
Good morning.
going to try and put a little bit more detail on what we talked about last week. This is a few slides from a presentation that I've given at a conference. This is usually like an hour-long presentation, but this is just a little bit of it. The presentation in general talks about the evolution of tiny homes, why we're even talking about it now, historically what we lived in. You look back not even all that long ago, houses, well, in the previous century, in the last 50 years, houses were about 25% smaller than they are now. And for some reason, or for several reasons, but I won't go into, they've grown, and our incomes haven't grown, but houses have grown. And if you look at the usage of houses, we don't even use all the spaces that we have. We just want a big house. So there has been a movement for several reasons, and I'll talk about those, that people want a smaller house. I mean, it's more practical for some people. Some people see it as getting rid of all their stuff, and they can just concentrate on what's important. But in practical terms, a lot of these are kind of a fantasy. I mean, people think that it's a great idea. I want to live in a tiny home. It's going to be wonderful. And if you look at any of these people on YouTube that do it, you can see how wonderful it was at first. And then after a year or two, they're ready to move out of it. Mm-hmm. And they struggle along because they have followers on YouTube, and they're making money off of it. But most people, and even the as I mentioned before, the association that builds a certain kind of tiny home, they don't recommend that you live in these full time. They're to be vacation or temporary homes. So in some instances it works for people perfectly. I'm not saying that it can't, but the majority of tiny homes are just to be used temporarily. They're not permanent housing. It can work, but that's probably not the majority of it. So a tiny home by building code definition is 400 square feet or less. Anything between 400 and what we would consider reasonable, let's say 1,200, that's a small house, but it's not technically a tiny home. I also want to mention that if y'all haven't been up the road to Americus, to the Global Village, it's fascinating there. You see how houses are built for regular people in other countries. And these would be considered tiny homes here. How they build in certain countries in Africa and in India. They're small houses, but they're comfortable, but they're probably 600 square feet. That's what people live in, a lot of people live in all over the world. But in America, we want a 2,500 square foot plus house. And people are trying to get away with that. But the tiny homes that a lot of people think of are built to a building code, but it's not the building code that we recognize, and they're on wheels. They are park model homes or recreational vehicles. That's what they're defined as. We don't allow those in the community except in RV parks. So in our zoning ordinance, they're only allowed in RV parks and mobile home parks. So they're not allowed anywhere except in those areas.
Mr. Ford, for that. Before you move from that, so sure. You're referring to the house on the left?
Yes, the house on the left most definitely, but the house on the right could be, and it could just be that they built a deck around it.
Okay, but the wheels is what you're referring to?
Yeah,
okay.
Right. Built on a chassis, brought in on wheels. Some communities do allow those, but they have to be anchored. So if that was something we looked at, they'd have to just have standards for how they are placed. As I said, they're not allowed to be used as permanent, or not recommended by the manufacturer to be used as permanent residences. So another little bit about where they came from. Hurricane Katrina. On the right, you see what's called a Katrina Cottage. A group of architects got together. What people were dealing with after Katrina were the FEMA trailers, and people thought that, this is going to be somewhat of a long-term residence for people. Let's make it a little bit more dignified. And this group of architects got together, and they tried to create something that could be built for around the same price as a FEMA trailer, but it would look like the housing from New Orleans that it was replacing. And you can see that they're fairly successful on that. But then it turned out that, it's architect designed, it has fancy details on it, and it's every bit as expensive as a 1,200 square foot house. But it looks nice. So factory built homes are really what we're talking about. Here's just a little overview of factory built homes, mobile homes. That's pre-1976. Manufactured homes technically is all the mobile homes, what we call mobile homes. Manufactured home is a technical name. Modular homes are built in a factory, and they can be allowed in any zoning district. Residential zoning districts allow modular homes. Typically, they look better than manufactured homes, not always. And then park model is what I was referring to. Those are the ones, like the upper right is a park model, and tiny homes is just kind of jargon. It can mean, technically it means everything under 400 square feet, but people call anything that's small a tiny home.
Which one is the modular?
The modular. The one on the right, lower right, is a modular. Okay. And you can see sometimes it looks like a, it looks like a nice double wide, but those are allowed in an R1 district by building code, but a manufactured home that looked just like that would not be. So, tiny homes. There's a variety of tiny homes. Some of them are one of a kind, architect designed. Some of them are, factory built, like the one on the lower left is factory built, comes in on wheels. But, it's not a bad looking house, but, whether or not you'd want it next door to you. And then there's even some that are built and then put on lakes. The one on the lower right is actually a floating tiny home. So in some communities, you have those as lake houses, actually on the lake. I think this is the last slide. No, it's not. Okay, so this one really highlights the differences in what tiny homes can be used for. On the right, you have tiny homes, which are basically just garden sheds. This is a homeless community. I think it's in Seattle. Places that have a big problem with homeless. This can be used as a temporary transition. It gives people a place to put their stuff, a place to sleep, that they can lock the door. It's not much more than that. It works in some areas, and that is like the very, let's just say, bottom end of the spectrum as far as affordability, and it doesn't provide a lot of services. So on the left, this is a grouping of tiny homes. This is a development in coastal South Carolina, and it's a master plan community. You have houses that are $5 million with large lots, and then you have smaller homes, and then in the middle of the community you have these. And these are not places, I would guess, that people live all the time. They come with their family, and they stay there for a couple weeks, maybe during the summer, and they rent it out through Airbnb otherwise. But these things here, tiny homes, they cost initially $250,000. They're probably reselling for $400,000 now. They're really nicely designed, custom homes, but that's a different scale. It's still probably not a permanent residence. So I've given you a lot of information about tiny homes. What I would recommend is, if you all want to pursue this further, any amendment to the zoning ordinance is going to have to go through the Planning Commission. I'd recommend you all recommend to the Planning Commission that they study the issue and come back with some sort of recommendation to you all. There is one thing that, allowing for tiny homes takes two things from the commission, or could take two things. The first thing would be to adopt the permissive code that the state of Georgia has allowed governments to adopt if they choose. It's an amendment to the building code which gives tiny homes more flexibility. There's certain allowances, certain exemptions that are allowed if a local government passes this building code. And that applies only to houses that are 400 square feet or less. But it's a variety of things to make them easier to design. That's one thing. And that's not required. But the other thing, I think, is to have the Planning Commission look at and make recommendations. Where do you want to allow tiny homes at all, or if at all? So the Planning Commission would study it and come back with a recommendation to you all that then you could take or modify or reject. I think it's a great idea, and I think that certainly as accessory dwellings, I think it should definitely be considered. As a development, I think it definitely should be considered. I'm not so sure about standalone homes in an established neighborhood, but that's up to the community to decide, you all to decide. So I'd recommend that you recommend the Planning Commission look at it.
I have a question, sir.
Mr. Johnson?
Mr. Forgate, so there's a way to have the planning committee or have the zoning where you cannot just put a standalone tiny house, quotations, yes, into a established single-family community?
That's correct. Yeah.
There's a way to write that?
Yes. Okay. Yes, sir. I mean, currently you can't anyway, because it's really impractical to design something 400 square feet or less anyway. You could put a 600 square foot house in a R1 neighborhood if it was designed properly, which is not impossible. But people just, the market has made it so nobody's going to build a 600 square foot house and put it out near the golf course because it's going to cost as much as it would a 2,000 square foot house.
Right.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Jones?
Yeah, I think, you know, as you move forward in the phases of talking with the planning commission is that you, we look at these as we do RV parks, mobile home parks. There need to be a tiny home park where all you got in there is tiny homes, because I can see you now opening up a can of worms because somebody's going to stick a tiny home in a subdivision. They're going to try that. So if you just get ahead of all of these type things and have a tiny home park, some areas that what is going to be the recommendation for a tiny home park, what's going to be the square footage of whatever, how much room you're going to need. So if you're going to be developing this, it needs to be developed right from the beginning, a tiny home park somewhere. What is the rules for a tiny home park?
Okay.
Do we want to ask the planning commission to make a suggestion on this so that we're out in front of it?
What, I mean, what's the root nature that is spawning this? I mean, what's the concern? Or, I mean, I think you brought it up, Commissioner Johnson. What is it? Just in an established neighborhood, somebody dropping a tiny house in there and disrupting the continuity, or is it somebody dropping, you know, a tiny home in the middle of, you know, 5 acres in the unincorporated county? What's the risk of us not doing this?
I think there has been communications around the community about possible developments like this, and making sure that they go in the right places the right way and being ahead of it, so we're not in a situation where somebody's doing something that's lawful, but it's going to make our communities look worse.
So could we do it like a special approval, like we would, you know, other zoning situations, where, you know, if it's a tiny home that is smaller than the square footage threshold in that given zoning, obviously they can't do that. But if they want to build a cluster of these things, you know, now it becomes a special zoning required for it. Because I look at places like Stonebridge and other country club developments, much like that South Carolina development, they do have, you know, tennis villas or, you know, kind of golf course clusters of these smaller homes that retirees love. You know, the younger couples like to start there. And so I think it may hinder us a little bit, but at the same time,
I wanted to adopt the state's uniform code.
Okay.
And so that way, if a developer is looking at our area, at least they know that we at least have the state's code in place.
Gotcha.
And I may have missed something, what I was gathering is some of these tiny homes could currently plop in and be in compliance with our existing zoning, which I never thought that I'd ever be at a commission meeting where I was going to be talking about tiny homes. It's just weird. These things look like tree houses to me, like playhouses for kids, and that's not. I mean, these things have, you know, like a sewer tap or, you know, septic tank or what have you, and I could totally see how that could disrupt the value or negatively impact the value of an established neighborhood if that were capable. And I don't know enough about this subject to be educated enough on it. My personal gut would be to get staff and the planning commission to develop a suggestion so that we can actually look at something and talk about what it would or would not prohibit, and let's get some more information on it, because I certainly wouldn't want, you know, a bunch of little tiny homes come in to my neighborhood.
But I want to add, it could also open the door for a new way that we address homelessness. And so I think here locally, we have a lot of folks in boarding houses kind of thing. If you could take that space and open up a community for homeless people, not to say it look like the other one, but something, you know, that changes the neighborhoods, and most of those, a lot of those are in the historic preservation communities too. So there's going to be a certain level of architectural work that goes into it, but just thinking of new ways and different ways to address some of our homeless population in some of our really nice neighborhoods that are slowly decaying because of the boarding houses or just people that need somewhere to stay or stay in, you know, in rundown places just to have shelter.
Yeah, understood. All right, we in consensus, we're ready to receive more information on this issue and some suggestions from staff and the planning commission. Does that sound reasonable? Okay, all right, very good.
Okay, and Mr. Chairman, if I may, just to give you a time on that, it would be too late to put it on the November agenda, so at earliest it would be on the December agenda of the Planning Commission, and since that's a quick month for everybody, you probably won't hear about it till the new year.
That's
Okay.
perfectly fine.
Just want to let you know.
21 gone by?
So, I'm sorry.
I said this year's gone by? 2021, the year.
Yes.
It's gone by.
Yes. Weird year. All right. Any other delegations that did not previously sign up that wish to be heard at this time? All right. Purchases. Recommendation to purchase 10 stainless steel toilet sink combination units for the jail from the single source vendor engineering and equipment company out of Albany, Georgia, in the amount of $26,950. This vendor has provided the toilet sink combination units for the jail for over 5 years. Funding is budgeted in SPLOST 7. Jail equipment, Mr. Addison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, everyone. This is the standard replacement of these. We recommend approval.
Okay. I'm assuming these toilet sink combinations have passed their lifespan?
Yes, sir.
Question? Was it the result of vandalism? I mean, that really does happen a lot out there. Some of the inmates will take and shove things down and then cause major plumbing problems. Victor, Commissioner Edwards, I'm sorry.
Yes, I guess, Mr. Scott, I see what they've been doing it for 5 years. I'm definitely in support of the local business, but is it any other vendors in the city can provide that same toilet? In the back there.
No, this is a sole source vendor for this particular unit. It's a combination toilet sink that's made of stainless steel. Most of the fixtures in the jail are currently porcelain by design. We're trying to replace those, about 10 per year as we move along. Cost is quite high for the units, about $2,500 a piece. So we're replacing 10 per year. Now, obviously, we would rather replace them all at one time. That would be in excess of $2 million, so we're phasing it.
I think what Commissioner Edwards is asking is there somebody else that sells these stainless steel things in town?
Sole source vendor.
So, yeah, that's what threw me off, because I was wondering, you know, in support of the local contractor, it was just, you know, we cutting it by.
Unfortunately, there's no local source for this.
Because I remember we did it in the past, we did a couple of years ago. I mean, we replaced some a couple of years ago.
We've
Yeah.
replaced about 10 per year for the last
Okay.
several years, but it's been for the same vendor.
Okay,
All right.
thank you.
Yes, sir.
Very good. All right. Any other comments or questions on that item? Move on. All right. A recommendation to accept the conceptual construction and project cost estimates for a standalone coroner's office and facility, moored, in the amount of $1,255,460. Funding is available in SPLOST 7. Mr. Addison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have before you today another conceptual layout design of the proposed morgue facility. And this facility, we had some comments last time about temporary office space at the morgue. This would allow for the coroner's office and his staff to be located there full-time. So this would be a standalone facility that functions on a daily basis. And I'll let the architect come up and discuss some of the features of the plan. But we met with the architect and the coroner to discuss this, and you know, they can answer questions about it. As far as funding goes, in SPLOST 7, we originally had about $414,000, We have obligated about $45,000 towards the architect services. So that would leave us a shortfall in the budget of about $840,000. Now, potential option for that could be to include it on the SPLOST 8 referendum, but we're here today to, present this out for you and get your comments and guidance here.
All right, thank you. Any thoughts or comments? Mr. Maskey, did you have anything else to add?
I'm sorry?
Did Mr. Maskey have anything else to add?
I don't have anything to add unless you have questions regarding it's a concept plan based on the discussions that we had with the coroner and the county, recognizing the needs are different for a standalone facility than a facility that would be divided. We've come up with a simple double-loaded corridor plan, includes all the spaces necessary without any of them being excessive, oversized. It's an efficient and compact. It would be straightforward construction, most likely wood construction, pre-engineered trusses and so forth. And then there's a second sheet that shows a conceptual elevation that, because the idea is, again, for it to be along the traceable, will be as maintenance-free as possible, so it can brick veneer, aluminum frame windows, shingle roof, in the same general concept as the adjacent public works building and the other buildings right there, that complex together. As I mentioned, brick veneer that would be color and style compatible with what exists there now.
Commissioner Johnson?
So it'll match the other buildings in the county complex?
It will not exactly match. It'll be complementary, so it'll be slightly different color and so forth. The other buildings have some split face block and that sort of thing, and so also some brick that's actually not Georgia brick. This would be a old Georgia red clay, brown clay type brick facility with accent stripes and so forth that would be compatible and coordinate with the adjacent public works building, but not be an identical tool.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, would you ask the coroner to approach?
Yes, Mr. Coroner.
Yes, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
You got any comments?
No, we've met, like I said, Mr. Scott and Mr. Massey, and everything seemed to be falling into place, how they got the building built, so, from the morgue versus the office and the administration office. I think it's a good concept.
It's a good concept.
Yes, sir.
All right, so we heard it's a good concept.
Yep.
All right. All right.
Yeah. It's an expensive concept.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very expensive.
Yes, so
concept.
Chairman, I would like to add that this 1.2 million is a direct result of the current construction market due to COVID-19.
Okay.
How much of an increase over pre-COVID costs?
Mr. Maskey?
I'm sorry, I did not hear.
How much, what percentage increase would you guess we are seeing here because of COVID, as the county administrator suggested?
I can't give you an exact percentage increase. In our effort to try to come up with a current viable construction cost, I did make a number of contacts to contractors, suppliers, and that sort of thing. Some items like structural steel and steel tubes and those sorts of things are 2, 3, and 4 times what they were just a year ago, which is, you may remember the last concept was a steel building. We went away from that to wood to make it simpler, more competitive, and easier to construct. But even wood prices are up 50 to 60%. The labor pool is difficult these days because contractors are unable to either keep or find competent support. things like HVAC ductwork, sheet metal, all those costs are affected. And then, so percentage-wise, I can't give you a number. I tried to build square footage prices that were reflective of today's market. And the estimate still includes the various equipment and cabinetry and all those sorts of things. So the estimate is a project cost estimate, not just a construction cost estimate, just so you understand. It has, you know, all the equipment, the furniture, and all that in there.
Okay, and all of it probably has escalated. What was the amount in SPLOST 6 for this line item, Mr. McCoy?
The budget in
The budget was $414,000 in SPLOST 7, and then we allocated just about $45,000 towards architect fees and construction oversight, you know, throughout the process.
400 and what?
14,000.
All right.
Is there, I got a question, one more question on this.
Commissioner Johnson.
Is there any, and I mean, Commissioner Newsom, you may have some input on that too. Is there any indicator that waiting a year would bring the cost down lower? Or wait, I'm just asking a question in future time, if you can help with that. Or Mr. Maskey maybe have input. If we waited a year or 2 years, and just asking, you know, with our situation where we are now, will we save any money?
You know, I kind of have a reputation for being brutally honest, so I'm going to, you know, I will, which I hope doesn't get me in trouble. The market is very difficult right now. I'm no economic expert, but I've been at this now for 40-something years, and the market goes up, it tends to come back down. I personally, not that I'm some forecaster, but I feel like, as we've seen in Albany before, the market's going to come back down, and when it comes back down, the numbers come back down. I think the idea here was to try to move forward with getting the plans and everything ready, so when the market is more favorable, you can hit it immediately and be, as they say, you know, ready to go to the street with the plans. Frankly, I think that the market will turn, just when, don't know, whether it's a year, 8 months, or 18 months, I don't know. But the intent is to design it to be simple, straightforward, efficient, low maintenance, and so that when it does go to market, you can get multiple prices. You're probably aware in other projects that you're bidding, it's difficult to get competitive pricing right now, partially because lots of contractors are real busy and they don't need to bid everything that comes out. But when the market turns, one of the favorite places to go is to government projects because you know they got the money to pay for it.
So today we're just looking at the conceptual drawings, not to pull the trigger on the start of construction phase.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
It would be so if we were to put this on the next regular meeting, it would be to adopt and approve the conceptual drawings for which Mr. Maskey has given us as a tool, essentially, his projected construction costs given the current day environment, which obviously doesn't obligate us to do anything. From just a fiduciary standpoint, on behalf of the commission, you know, and this is not a criticism, I'm alarmed at the projected cost for this project, especially in comparison to the dollars that we had allocated. I'm not a construction guru, I'm not an architect, but I mean, we're talking about an $800,000 shortfall. That's not, I mean, that's a lot. There's a lot of roads that could be paved, a lot of alleys that could be paved, a lot of sewers that we put in. But it's also a capital project that is important. It's obviously important to the coroner, it's important to us, and it increases our overall capabilities. I just did not I wasn't prepared to receive that number at that height today, but I think there's some wisdom. What I would humbly suggest to my colleagues on the commission is let's take up the discussion regarding the conceptual drawings, but I think we're also going to need to have an open and honest discussion with staff about, you know, what are our options, yeah, so. Commissioner Newsom.
I have the same concerns. I don't think there's any question the morgue should have been built a long time ago.
Sure.
And I don't have any problem with that. I think it's our duty to build more. I think that when I opened up that thing on Friday and saw this, I mean, I about hit the floor. We've got to build a morgue that's functional, that the coroner can work in that. But I think right now what we got in today's environment, and I have got no magic ball to tell you what's going to happen. I think that I can, in all consciousness, I cannot support this conceptual drawing. I think we need to look at a condensed version, something that we can get it cost down on it, regardless of the environment. You're $800,000 over what? That money's got to come from somewhere. And, you know, I just feel like that we can do a better job of maybe getting our costs down on this building, even though we're in a tough environment. I do understand that construction environment is cyclical. It runs in a cycle. And it's kind of like gasoline and everything else. Sure. It just runs in a cycle. But I feel like that like I say, we need a morgue. It's our responsibility to have a morgue. And we need to do this, but we don't need to do it at all cost. I mean, I just can't in all consciousness look at spending that kind of money for a morgue.
Do we have, and I recognize, you know, how many square feet is this concept?
3,700.
3,700.
How many square feet do we have at Phoebe where we keep the bodies there? 100? You know, any idea, Mr. Corner? I mean, just go. It's probably more of a question for Mr. Fowler. I mean, they got a room that's refrigerated, and they put, you know, the family's deceased, you know, relatives there.
Yes.
But I'm just wondering, is there not a way that this could be done, you know, in like half the square footage? I mean, I'm really.
We did have an option that we brought to the commission presented last meeting. We discussed about this, and it was, if I remember correctly, $855,000. It was a condensed version of what you have in front of you.
I mean, it's still expensive, still way over budget, but I mean,
It was still over budget, but it was less than this.
Mr. Chairman, I think aren't you giving up your real estate in the courthouse? Aren't you giving up your office space and real estate in the courthouse?
If they build this building, yes, I am.
So that square footage there plus what you have at Phoebe.
Yeah.
So they're trying to replace that.
Yes.
I knew that, but what I have in my head is, you know, we have essentially a large refrigerated room, and then we have, you know, some admin space and a place for an office for you, you know, obviously bathrooms and et cetera. I'm wondering if we could, I mean, that's like bigger than, you know, a fire station, is sort of what I have in my head. It's just a thought in my head.
Question.
Yes, Commissioner Gaines.
Thank you. It seems to me that there may be a few options here. I don't fully understand whether or not you're asking us to, it says recommendation to accept the conceptual construction and project cost estimates. That's kind of a strange recommendation to me. It just seems to me that we need to flesh it out and see what our options may be in this case, and come back with a recommendation in terms of timing, in terms of size, in terms of cost. What are our options? This is only giving us one option. There may be others out there. So I would think that we want to look at all of our options here.
Let me say something.
Commissioner Jones?
Yeah, you know, we just can't afford to build this. I mean, it's just bottom line. So if we can't afford to build, then we should either do the wise thing, which is common sense. If we can't afford to build this thing, we just need to wait until we can get the funds available, because there's a lot of time and effort has gone into this conceptual design. And so if we're going to wait another 12 months, another 8 months, or whatever to see what this plan is going to be, because the problem I have with it, if you cut it in half, is the coroner going to be able to do what he needs to do? I'm sure when you all sat down and looked at the scope of work and what you needed done here was what we needed to have done. I'm sure that's what you did. So it may be just a good opportunity. We don't have to build this thing in the morning, so why can't we just wait and see what the market is going to do? And then with the timetable saying that let's wait 6 months, see if the market is going to come down, 12 months or whatever, and then we have a timetable. Because I heard what you said is that this conceptual design is shovel ready. If the market comes down, you want to go ahead and put it in. Is that not what I heard? You want to go ahead and build it. If the prices and everything come down, you want to go ahead and put it in. So that's what I recommend we do.
Commissioner Gray?
So piggybacking off what you just mentioned, I agree. If we have a design that at some point in the future can be affordable for the money budgeted, that's great. But Mr. Maschke, let me ask you a question. In the past decade, could you have ever built this building for $500,000?
No, you couldn't have.
Why are we designing something bigger and more expensive than what we could budget for it anyway, even when the market was at its
The budget
bottom?
that you originally set at 414
Right.
was not based on any building program.
Sure.
It was simply leftover money. It was a number that had no basis relative to the project at hand.
Right.
And it was originally conceived as a facility that was only to provide a refrigeration and support spaces. That from the very outset, every estimate showed that it would be beyond the 414. Again, because that number had no basis in relevance of
Right.
fact. Then it was decided, after several iterations, to take a look at a standalone facility that now includes space for staff.
Right. But knowing that there's a consensus to build a standalone facility that provides administrative space plus storage space, we know we have $414,000 earmarked for this in SPLOST that has to be spent on that. We obviously know, even in a good market with labor costs and construction costs, this is going to cost more than $415,000. But why is it 3 times as much? Can we scale this entire concept down to something that we know in a relatively average market might be, between $500,000 and $600,000? Find a functional plan in that ballpark rather than moving the target way over here, because it's not doable.
I just don't think that we are ready to come with a recommendation on this yet. It's just not ready. It's not fleshed out well enough. We don't know what our options are here. So I'm really quite surprised to see this in front of us at this point with as little understanding of what our options are and how we're going to finance it and where the money is coming from.
And based
It
on
just isn't ready,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right, and based on my little experience in building, we're to the tune of 800,000. I'm gonna just go ahead and move it to the next 10th and say $1 million. But then too, you don't know what else are you gonna find in there. Then next thing you know, you at $1.5 million, $1.4 million. That's how building work. You got, these are just preliminary numbers we're looking at here. So I think we just need to we just need to put the brakes on this thing until we figure out a better way and for us to be able to come up with something that we can afford. Affordability is what's here, and no deal is a good deal if you can't afford it.
It just needs more work.
I think there are a couple of things. I'm sorry. Commissioner Edwards, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want to, I guess, back us up a little bit when Albany State came and did a presentation. And then I think with the coroner putting his input in that there are some availabilities down the road where we can probably do some training classes, where we talked about the body holding unit where the GBI can come in and do some lab work that we was able to charge a fee. And I want us to keep in mind that we're not necessarily building the morgue for the present coroner. We're not building the morgue for us as commissioners sitting around this table. I mean, we're building the morgue that is going to precede us. So again, I think we have to think from a standpoint of from a future standpoint. And like the architect said, when we allocated the money during the splash, you didn't put enough money in there anyway. So now you have a plan. I agree with what Commissioner Jones is saying. You know, we have something that we can work with when the opportunity comes, even like our assistant county administrator stated that maybe we can add on in Splash 8. So it's not necessarily we got to do it now, but we're going to have to do it. And when we look at the cost of, so we kind of, I think the coroner, I think he has a great concept of saying, hey, we need to go forward. We need to go a little bit further than you have come. So it's like, we talk about the Albany State. I think they have and I'm not talking about bringing them in for funding, but there's an opportunity down the road, like the chairman said last week, you know, you bid it, they'll come. So we don't have a state-of-the-art facility right now. So to me, that's the way I was taking this idea to a different level of the opportunities. When you guys remember when Chief Presley came and he talked about some of the labs around us closing. Now we can actually use this as a training area. We always talking about training the students at Albany State, and they're leaving us. Well, here's a place, a state-of-the-art facility that now we can utilize and actually help us offset some of the costs. But right now, like the chairman as well as Commissioner Johnson saying, we ain't got to do this today, but this is where we really need to be. We don't need to back up. You know, so for me, it justifies where we're going for the future. And we didn't allocate enough money when the people voted on it. So this is where we at.
This item B, yes, thank you. Item B says recommendation. This is a recommendation to accept the conceptual construction and project cost estimates for. So I don't ever recall accepting anything like this. I don't really know what it is, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, we've done this before, but we've done this before with many other projects. You get your construction drawings and you get the projected costs, and then that serves as a starting place in terms of your budget. Obviously,
does this commit us to anything?
No. All it does is we've approved of the project in its current iteration, and it's sort of an acknowledgement that the construction costs as projected on this day by Mr. Maschke, given today's assumptions, that's what the projected construction costs are, but that doesn't obligate us to do anything or to spend the first dollar. I will say though, I mean, I still do think, and this is my perspective, I think that I think the building obviously as designed is very state of the art. I also think there's some fat that could be trimmed respectfully and without sacrificing the state-of-the-art nature of the building or sacrificing the functionality and its importance to Mr. Fowler, which is obviously a consummate professional. Anyone who would come in after him would be charged with doing the same job. What I'd like to suggest to everyone and to staff is, and I remember very, very, very well how this got put on our SPLOST, and I'm not going to go into all that, but it is a need. Like it is, our community needs a morgue. That is, I agree, check, okay, I'm sold. We need that. I advocated for it. That's based on some things that were going on at the time, and advocated for it for you and for any coroner that would be in that position. But I also remember if we were funding a lot of other projects, and what Mr. Maskey said was absolutely correct. This was essentially the leftover money from SPLOST 6. It was $414,000, which we know can't build the facility that needs to be built. So that leads us to different discussions, and one of which I think Mr. McCoy alluded to earlier, which is, you know, how you get your fork, your knife, your plate, but you got no steak. Do we need to talk about this, you know, additional funding coming up in a future SPLOST? I think that would be a wise discussion.
Yeah.
And I frankly think that's sort of.
And that's the point I'm making.
Yes, ma'am.
That we rarely come with something with a recommendation that is as open as this is. $1.2 million, and the funding is not available to fund it.
Well,
Is the point I'm making.
Yes, ma'am.
We don't know how we're going to pay for it. Why would we accept the bill?
well, we do though, because we approve. A lot of times you're approving what you want. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean you're going to buy it, but it does turn your brain on to start thinking about, okay, what if there are other funding sources, or could we apply for a grant, or this or that? Sometimes approving the construction drawing can open the door for, because you can say it's a shovel-ready project. Right. We've approved the construction drawings. We're now going to apply for the morgue grant, you know, for lack of a better phrase,
yeah.
or for trails. And so I do think we need to talk through this conceptually. I can appreciate the fact that you're being very careful, as you always are, fiscally, because you want to make sure we're not committing something that we shouldn't. But I think we're going to need recommendations from staff, and I think it would be wise to get some recommendations from staff on financing and with respect to the different options that are there. Yes. And we don't have to tackle this all at one time. And to my commissioners who have suggested being methodical, I want to commend you, because I think that's the correct approach. And I think this needs to come back to another work session with the other options that we've previously looked at that are consistent, and also to talk openly and frankly about how we may want to address funding in terms of SPLOST 7 or, you know, any other potential thing that's, and there may be a grant out there, you know, especially for a community of our size that experienced the number of deaths that we had with COVID. There may be a grant, and so I'd like to.
Mr. Chairman, yes, if I could come in right with you on this point. It's SPLOST 7, and we're talking about going over and adding more costs into SPLOST 8. I think we did not put enough money into this project to start with, but we have, item number 9, over $5 million in county road improvements and equipment. But we also have T-SPLOST. So are we saying that there isn't any more money in SPLOST 7?
No, that is not my suggestion.
No, not saying, but I'm asking that question before we go to SPLOST 8. Are we saying that there's not other monies left over in SPLOST 7? And let me be clear. I'm not saying that I want to spend $2 million on a morgue, but I'm asking before you put it on the next voters referendum, is there money left over in SPLOST 7
That we could reallocate.
that we could reallocate?
That was one of the reasons why I was gonna ask for, would they recommend doing it in SPLOST 8, or is there enough cushion left in SPLOST 7?
Right.
So I concur with you. Could staff analyze those issues, Mr. McCoy?
Yes, sir.
Because we do, and Commissioner Johnson's 100% correct, like, we do leave in those, when it comes like road resurfacing, sewer, like, we always leave a lot of money in there so that we always have money on hand.
Yes, sir.
But I think we need an assessment of how much cushion, if any, there is in there. Obviously, we don't want to sacrifice,
And what I'm trying to get to is, when we look back at stuff, hindsight is 2020. When I'm looking at SPLOST 7 list, we had improvement costs that were over millions of dollars on the health department, over $1 million. The candy room, over $1 million, but we only put $400,000 to build something out of the ground. And I think that's our fault. We didn't look at that SPLOST 7.
yeah, we bear some responsibility in terms of the budgeting. And
Yes, sir.
Can I ask a general question
Sure.
to the board? What type of budget would you feel comfortable with to spend more, building it up out of the ground? I mean, barring inflationary costs and high labor costs where we are today.
I can answer that
I mean,
question.
would it
I
be-
can answer that.
I don't think it's a guess. It has to be something based on a concept or a building. Here's the kind of building that we want, here's what it costs. That's how you normally do it. Now, if we're talking about scaling the building back, then you're reducing your costs. It's all tied to the concept. So just setting an amount and saying, I'm willing to live with this amount. And then too, the second part of it is, where is it gonna come from in SPLOST? Where's the money coming from? Whatever amount that is. Obviously, this is nowhere near sufficient. So where are you gonna get the money from? It just seems to me that this is just needs a lot more, as the chairman suggests, it just needs to be fleshed out quite a bit more.
Can we, the folks who are on the phone, could we mute, please?
Chatter or something, sidebar conversation.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Gaines, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was trying to get this chatter out of your conversation. But
But did you get my point?
yes, ma'am, I do. And to Commissioner Gray's point, I just know this. I had massive sticker shock at 1.255 million. And that's not a criticism of anyone. I mean, that just is what it is. That's the answer for where we're currently at with this facility. I just don't think that this pie is done cooking yet. And we need some more information in a new work session. Commissioner Newsom?
I think what we've got to do, I think anytime that you're going to build a building, anybody in their right mind is going to know what that building costs, but they also got to know where the money's coming from. Mm-hmm. I think we spend time figuring out how much money we got. Then we can conceptually get a drawing for that amount and then move forward. Right now, I mean, I would never be in favor of spending $1.2 million on a conceptual drawing. I don't think that you're there yet. I think what you do is you find your resources to be able to build it, and then you build the building around what your resources are.
And I think that's a good point. And this is with the consensus of the commission, if there is consensus. I'd like for Mr. McCoy and staff to make a recommendation about what funds we have available, whether it would be within SPLOST 7 from another source, or, and maybe the staff says, no, we don't recommend doing that, or it's going to SPLOST 8, and if they have any sort of tighter or revised recommendations, or recommendations that are built on the marketplace. We questioned poor Mr. Maskey here about what's going to happen in the marketplace, and he's doing the best he can to answer our questions. But at the end of the day, he's not a financial forecaster. If we put him on the spot, I'm sure there's some more information we can get. And everyone wants to build a good morgue. I mean, so this isn't even an argument or a debate. It's just we're working through some of the complexities here. So, Commissioner
Chairman,
Warner? Yes, sir.
I agree with what you've been said. I mean, if you want to take a step back and look at it, but I think you still also need to consider, as Phoebe during the COVID time was asking how long we're gonna need people north. Both of us got mobile morgues over there right now. But I just want you to think about it. It's going to be another year, another 2 years. I don't know how long people are going to allow us to be in their morgue. But if I'm here to serve the public, serve the community.
Yes, sir.
Whatever you say, we'll go with it. If you want to build just a cooler, that's fine. Whatever you decide to do. But I thought, as Mr. Edwards said, we were building the state of the art, that we will not just use it as a morgue, as an education piece. And even Albany State came and did a presentation a few months back. They would want to collaborate with us and try to bring some money to the table. But whatever you decide to do, I mean, I'm here to serve.
Yeah, and I think those are good. And some of those concepts and representations were frankly notional. They weren't concrete. They weren't developed in. And I think to this point, you know, I have always had in my mind, you know, is there a marketplace, separate from the educational piece, but is there a marketplace for other counties to just lease space from us within, you know, and I think we need to get answers to that, and I'm saying that and I'm respectfully suggesting to my good friend the coroner that I think that'd be some good information to run down, because I think that would be good information for us to run down.
Yeah, we've had corners to come ask to use our morgue.
Mm-hmm.
So then, and that's one of the things that I brought to the commissioners earlier. I mean, if they use our morgue, in a sense, you don't want to rent a table to hold your body till the time to go to the crime lab. But I mean, some, even in Macon, they charge the other counties $100 a day just to have a body in the morgue. So I'm trying to say there's ways you can do it for this to be a piece for Southwest Georgia, not just Dougherty County. That it can be, like I said, a lifelink, the organ donor, different places, they need a place sometime to harvest skin or bone or eye enucleation. They probably can use our lab. One time they were paying funeral homes like $400 or $500 just to use the embalming room just to do harvest. Well, we got a state-of-the-art facility here. So I was just looking at the big picture. That's my vision.
Yeah.
So whatever y'all decide to do, I'm here.
I got you. I think we're going to bring this back on a future work session for some additional discussion so we can zero in on it a little bit more. And I'd also, Mr. McCoy, to the extent that staff can get this together, I'd really like to know if there is a marketplace. Now, when we had the discussion with ASU, as I understood it, the president of ASU did not know that her staff members were coming over here and making that recommendation. So that was a little bit of a situation where the left hand wasn't talking to the right hand. That's not a criticism of anybody, but that was the reality. So, and the president's obviously the one with great discretion and the ability to wield the checkbook, which is really important. And I think there's some interesting, I would love to explore all these things, but I think we also have to get a real assessment of how viable that is. So.
One thing, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Commissioner Jones.
Before you go, I was sitting there last night, and Friday, Saturday, I was looking at the sports, and they had girls softball over in Adel, Georgia, Cook County, little small town. Some of us on this very commission, we sat out and went out to Pauline's Park. We talked about having a state-of-the-art recreational field. That could have been us last night. Now we have another opportunity here. We're looking here at this state-of-the-art conceptual of what we have for a morgue. I sure hate to see us miss another opportunity. I don't want this design touched. I think it needs to remain the same. But what we're going to need to do is find out how we can afford it. But we don't need to cut anything out of this thing. It needs to stay the way it is, and we need to figure out a way to buy it.
I think that's what we're going to have to talk about as a group at our next work session, is whether we remain committed to this iteration or something a little bit more condensed or not, and also to explore revenue and financing options. Because right now our eyeballs are a little bit bigger than our stomach, and we just got to figure that out. So it's good work. Thank you all for this information. All information is good information, so it helps us in the decision-making process. We're going to move on now.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Recommendation to accept the proposal for a comprehensive classification and compensation study for Dougherty County Human Resources for Management Advisory Group of Spartanburg, South Carolina, in the amount of $39,700. 4 firms submitted proposals, with the recommended vendor being selected as the lowest responsive and responsible proposer. Funding is budgeted in the general fund. Ms. Hall, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Chairman, Commissioners, County Administrator McCoy, Madam Clerk, various department managers, and I reviewed the 4 proposals that were submitted. Management Advisory Group has presented itself as the lowest responsive and responsible bidder that met the specifications from the RFP, and also served as the highest scored by the evaluators. We recommend that you accept the proposal.
Okay, any comments, questions, or discussion?
Now, this is the actual comprehensive pay study?
Yes, sir.
Okay, not a survey?
Not a survey.
Got it.
Full study.
Very good.
Okay.
Thank you. All right.
One quick
Mr.
thing.
Commissioner Edwards.
I ain't had time to look at it like I want to. What is the timeline for your recommendations to come back to?
March, April.
What's that?
Between March and April.
March and April next year?
Yes, sir.
Okay. I guess one thing I did want to share from this last thing we did with the counties, we gave the $1,000 to none, but I guess it's just really for my board members. We have a person that actually worked for the county for 28 years, and in this last pay thing that we did, that particular person only had $1 increase in their check. And I guess I'm sort of, like Commissioner Newsom said, I was ashamed of that, where, they had that $1, 28 years of service, and have been in 3 different places with this county government. And, you was in Macon, what was it, Macon? And we said we was, how many years behind in study? How many years? Like 16 years we was behind in pay. I mean, I'm having a conversation with you. You don't have to answer, because I'm really talking to these guys. But we was like 16 years behind in pay. And this one particular person I know that has been with us 28 years, that was very saddening to me when I had got that phone call that they got $1 increase. And for me, I try to keep my comment real quiet, but we really blotched that last thing we did. And I guess going forward, I would like to see one of us on the Finance Committee who served to really have more active participation in this particular pay study. When we come back to the table, I would really like my Finance Committee to really participate in making that decision when it really come down to a county employee. That was really, so anyway, that was really my little.
I think there are 2 things that happened with pay. One, we approved a percentage increase in pay, which was a small percentage increase, but then we also provided bonuses through COVID dollars for employees. So what you're talking about was probably a small percent increase in pay. And you couple that with the increase of insurance premiums, and it kind of eats that up. But yeah, it may only be $1 or $2 at the end of the day when you're just doing it by percentage.
And that's what I'm saying. This time, when we come back in May, I would like the Finance Committee, yourself, to really evaluate what that percentage is. If a person been with us for 28 years.
Well, that's what this
And that's what I'm saying.
contractor is going to
So
determine.
it's not necessarily a debate. I'm just saying, I'm asking you to make sure that don't happen. $1 out of 28 years, you only got $1 raise?
I think that I understand what everybody's saying.
Yes, sir.
The study is going to be what the study is, and I'm sure the information is going to have to be delivered to the finance committee anyways, because they're gonna have to recommend a budget, whether or not they're gonna recommend that we institute, pay raises. So I really think that this is easy.
Yeah, I hope.
If that makes sense. Like, I think,
I thought it was easy the last time, but it wasn't easy. Because we started out with a myth. It was like everybody's gonna get 20%. And then when we came back, it was like not 20%, it was 5%, it was 10%, it was 3%. And we gave $1,000 to non-emergency people. So I understand the process. And I thought it was gonna be easy then, Mr. Chairman, but again, it was not easy as y'all start breaking down those numbers, where we had a lot of employees who was very saddened that they felt they didn't get what they was necessarily worth with the time that they've been with this county.
I'll tell you something funny
Commissioner,
that supports what Commissioner Gray said. Last January, us Social Security recipients got a
I hate to say this, but you're not at that $8 hour. We're not, when my county employees, we just gave our county employees. That we just took their salary up to $10 an hour. So again, that you kind of get what I'm saying. It's kind of
terms, because I can get $10 an hour or more, but only make 50 cents an hour or more at the end of the day.
some concerns, and it all comes from a very good place. And I think the step will be for us to get the information, and then for the finance committee to digest the information, and then there'll be a full presentation to the board. And let's just move on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
All right, next, and I apologize, there's a little bit of a typo on the next item. It's recommendation to accept the proposal to provide professional services for archaeological study of a multi-use trail for Dougherty County from Southern Research out of Pine Mountain, Georgia, in the amount of $28,284. 4 firms submitted proposals, with the recommended vendor being selected as the lowest responsive and responsible proposer. Funding will be provided by the Special Services District, with reimbursement provided by the EDA CARES Act for the development of trails at Radium Springs. Mr. McCoy.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, thank you. We are recommending approval. This is a requirement. We're in the middle of a application process, as we have been for some time now, for an EDA grant that we were denied for a trail segment that will run from Radium Springs to Albany State. And they contacted us and said that we can be reconsidered because they got more funding. And so I think we're really close, and this is the key to getting a decision. We have to complete this process. It's a cultural assessment because of the former Indian home place, I guess, if you will, has to be studied. And so this is what they will do, and then they'll come back with their findings, and we'll be able to move forward in the application process.
Yeah, and I know that everyone probably knows and remembers this from when we did the disaster pickup. There was that archaeological component. It was a component of any federally funded project. So,
and Mr. Chairman, to add to that, you know, they found some artifacts from early African Americans under the bus station, I think, and I think that area of Radium Springs was where Albany State was originally located. So I think there's going to be a lot of old artifacts to be found along that river basin, along with American Indians.
It's just required. That's all there is to it.
So it doesn't disqualify you if they find an arrowhead along the Flint River.
no, it will not disqualify.
You preserve it. You preserve it.
Yeah, that's right. All right, very good. We're going to move on. Additional business. Recommendation to declare the list of vehicles and equipment as surplus and authorizing the disposal of or sale of same via an online auction. Mr. Addison, anything to talk about on that? You going to recommend that we? Yes, sir. Okay, very good. All right, review and discuss the quitclaim deed from the Albany Dougherty Land Bank to Dougherty County, Georgia, to transfer property located in Radium Springs for the purpose of providing recreational opportunities. Mr. Lee's not here today, but Chucky's here. Morning, Mr. Mathis.
Good morning, Commissioners.
All right. Well, what can you tell us?
Well, I'm sure you got the quitclaim deed from Mr. Lee, and the Radium Springs, this concerns the old coon hunters property, which we've cleared and got it ready for whatever the county will want us to do with it in the future.
Understood. Any comments, questions?
It's in Putney, right?
Putney.
This is a good day for District 6. I'll tell you the truth. We've been working on this a long time.
It says Radium Springs. Is really more Putney?
Yes, but
We all know what we're talking about.
It's a bedroom community, right?
That's right.
Yeah, right on that corner.
All right, very good. Well, that's all very good. Thank you for your work on that. Okay, discussion pertaining to a countywide debris collection program. Mr. Addison?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Edwards asked that we looked into the purchase of a Knuckle Broom truck, which are debris collection trucks that are, have the arm that comes over and picks up yard debris off the side of the road. So, these trucks can start in, around $160,000 and go up north of $200,000, depending on the size. There are several considerations that, we'd like to bring forward to you. And, currently Public Works and Solid Waste do not have the staff to operate, this service. We do have some haulers that are out in the unincorporated areas of the county. If chose to move forward, we would recommend that this be set up as a standalone department that would operate as an enterprise fund, because there would be personnel, fuel, maintenance, capital expenditures, disposal costs. In order to do that, we would recommend hiring a consulting firm that could look at, the route, feasibility, cost, payment structure, how those things would be set up. And there are some other things that we need to think about, that there are a limited number of customers out in the county, and they are spread out far, so that'll have a direct effect on the cost of this service. And a lot of times you have a problem collecting fees from customers. Like the City of Albany has their garbage fees attached to the water and light bills, so if they'd have a customer that doesn't pay, the lights go out and the bills get paid. Contamination of yard debris can be a problem and a code enforcement issue, because if that debris is contaminated with household garbage and construction debris, then it has to go to our household landfill, and it costs a lot more. And we do have, the county landfill does accept up to 250 pounds of garbage free every day for any citizen that would like to bring it out. So we do have that option available now for customers. And, wanted to bring this up for discussion and see if, if the commission would like to move forward, we can develop an RFP for consulting services.
Okay. I have one thing. Yeah, Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, first of all, this discussion goes back to everybody, this discussion goes back to a conversation that me and you had. Now, I don't like the presentation this morning. This is the second time that we've kind of blew it out of proportion. Now, what I would like to back up and start with this, Mr. Chairman, what I would really like to do is the Public Works Committee have a meeting with our Public Works Director and really have a conversation to see what the feasibility is.
Of what?
Of the Knuckle Boom truck. What's happening in my district, and I guess across, where the age group of people, as we know, always are getting older, but people don't just burn the trash anymore because of their age. So that was how this conversation started. Older people say, hey, I'm 90 now, I don't burn the trash. And then it's causing a problem in their backyard. So again, this conversation started with wanting to let's look at the feasibility, the correct way, not necessarily coming to the table
without any information of how it can work or will it work. And so that's where I'm asking you to lead the Public Works Committee or myself to have a meeting with my Public Works Director, let us sit down, and you know, it might not be an everyday thing. It might be once a month of phone calls that you get in from, hey, can you come pick up my trash? I think I had a person call me last week, or 2 weeks ago, I think I gave them the Public Works Director. They had cut down some trees in their yard, and you know, of course, we don't pick up. So this is kind of how that conversation started. So for me, I don't necessarily say we need a Knuckle Boom truck until I have all the pieces and the information to come back to this commission and present it the correct way.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, the Knuckle Boom truck. Yeah, I would like to see if it's feasible. It might not be feasible. We might just have you know, contract it out to somebody like A1 Brantley that can, you know, pick up the trash.
I think that assumes a fair number of things. One, it's at least been my experience that, you know, folks that move into the unincorporated county understand they don't have trash service. And
Correct.
In fact, a lot of folks don't want trash service.
Yeah.
Because they don't want folks driving up in their yard. Secondarily, they chose to live in a more rural environment in many instances. Three, I think we have to have an actual assessment of demand as opposed to just one or two folks that call. And I recognize you've gotten a couple calls, and what I'm humbly suggesting is 2017, 18, 19, 20, through all these disasters as it related to debris pickup, I got 1,000 calls from folks in the city and the county. So I recognize and I get that. So what we're talking about is the feasibility of purchasing a $160,000 piece of equipment for what might be a few phone calls a month. My analysis of that is that's not very feasible. Like, I don't need a feasibility study if that is the demand. But if we're going to have a broader discussion about, you know, and this is hitting me sort of out of the blue because we're talking about adding a whole new service. And I know in the past we explored trying to get the city to provide that service out in the county, but they didn't want to do it because they had no way of collecting the money if they weren't paid, which then becomes a problem for us as well, and we can't provide it for free because then it's a violation of the gratuities clause. So I don't know how to, what is it that's left to analyze that we need to analyze? And I'm not trying to be funny, like I really am trying to understand what your question is.
Yeah, I mean, it's real simple. I'd like to sit down with the Public Works Director or Mr. Scott, and then let's just brainstorm to just have that discussion. And the way it was presented this morning was, I came to the podium with all the information of saying, this is not what we want to do. So I don't see any supporting information on, hey, it might work. And that's what we did a couple of weeks ago with the fans that we asked for, not me, the district asked for out at Putney Park. So again, if we gonna continue to play this game with staff, I didn't come to play a game. I can't, anytime I bring something to this table, it's not that Vic Dells came up with it. It was called from the public. Now, just like we came to the table with this corner drawing and we had the supportive documents. Now, Mr. Scott, I had to call Mike Friday and ask Mike what was the discussion gonna be like. To me, if you wanted to present it the right way, you say, hey, Commissioner Edwards, would you like this on the agenda for us to discuss it? And then we would have came today, I probably would have postponed it with a proper way of coming to this full commission. So if we gonna play this game about when Vic Edwards asked for something, that you want me to go through the county administrator with everything and before it's presented to the board, that's what we, so we can sit here and look like we shocked, but you know what I'm talking about. So again, I didn't like the way it's presented. You can scratch it. I prefer people just telling me, you know what, I don't want to do that. That's just like 2 weeks ago, you're going to come and present fans that's gonna cost $62,000. You telling me that I gotta take off a roof of a building and put some things. So again, this the same 3 items that we talked about when Mr. Scott came to the table and said, I was bullying him to do it. So again, Mr. Chairman, I sat here last month and asked you, hey, lead this. And that's what this conversation, these are the 3, this is the second item that we have talked about that Scott had a complaint about. So if y'all want to play the game, play the game.
I really don't understand.
I get you. You always gonna say you don't understand, but that's on you, Mr. Chairman.
No, I've been very respectful to you.
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, you can be respectful as well.
No, I am respectful for you, but when you allow them to come to this podium and you say you wasn't aware of it, you know what the game they're playing. He didn't say one supportive document to support this Knuckle boom truck.
So what you're
So
suggesting...
this Knuckle boom truck has been on this agenda since September the 26th. All I asked to have a positive discussion.
That's actually not correct.
Yeah, I have asked for a positive discussion.
That's actually not correct. When you say that it's been on the agenda since then, what you're talking about, and this is where we keep running into a problem.
Right.
This is where
where
one commissioner wants to dictate the course.
I didn't dictate one red thing to that man.
Okay. What the only
I did not dictate, Mr. Chairman.
Are you done?
No, I did not dictate this guy to do anything. I said, let's have a discussion on what would the feasibility be to have a Knuckle boom truck.
Right.
He took it out of proportion. I did not dictate him to tell him to go buy anything. This man can't buy anything without this board. I cannot do anything without this board approval.
Are you done?
I have a question.
I do want to respond. Sure. What we're talking about, what we keep running into a problem on, is when one commissioner wants one thing, and it hasn't been discussed as a group.
You don't discuss everything
me.
with him. You can hit that all you want.
Well, you
do
continue
not
to be
discuss
disrespectful.
everything with them.
Are you done?
No, when you were to correct me,
No,
me and you've been down this path in 2019.
Commissioner Edwards, you're out of order.
Now, when you bring it right, because I mean, Mr.
No,
Chairman,
this is out of order and it's unprofessional.
that's fine. I represent District 2. You chair.
No, you just don't want anyone to talk other than you.
When you don't say the statement correctly.
Okay. Well, then keep trying to muzzle me.
May I,
Gentlemen,
may I,
yes,
please?
let's move on. Let's move on to the next thing,
Oh,
please.
God, come on.
Come
May
on,
I-
Mr. Chairman, you
This
know
is
I don't play that
ridiculous.
game.
May I?
Commissioner Johnson was next.
Mr. Addison, so you're saying you're going to bring a consultant to the table to tell us about the feasibility? Will part of this feasibility could be that Public Works just buy one truck and it goes on the, does it have to go into a standalone?
It could be structured different ways, but we would like for a consultant to look at it and recommend the best way. It could
Okay.
be an on-call service.
Right,
you
right.
know,
That's
for
what I'm
one
getting
truck,
at.
But, you know, we need somebody to look at the route and the potential for customers and, you know, how that would look. And consulting firm can do that and give us an idea of what it would cost and how much we need to charge.
So our root issue is removing debris from, our root issue is removing of the debris. So it could be purchasing one truck, it could be contracting with a company, it could come in several different forms.
Right.
And that consultant is going to talk to us about which is the most feasible way to do that.
It could be.
Which is
Right.
the
Right, we can
precise
look at all that.
discussion that we were trying to have. Commissioner Gaines.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems to me the response should have been, here, this commissioner has problems that have been presented to him by his constituents. How can we address those problems? And that really ought to be the response to whatever a commissioner brings to this board. Is there a simple way to do it, or do we have to systematize it? Do we do it in an ad hoc way, or do we take it all the way? I mean, it runs the spectrum.
Sure.
And we have to select the one that is best suited to, number one, provide the service, and that is cost effective. You know,
Sure.
So, and that requires some work. It doesn't, we shouldn't just look at it in a cursory way and say, and make it too big to swallow. see if we can make it bite-sized, see if we can get it done should be the response. And I don't think we always get there.
Right, I think those were the precise talking points that we were going to talk through.
Well, I think
Commissioner Gray?
There's already debris pickup available in an unincorporated county. Any of the independent trash services can happy to discuss a fee arrangement with anybody. I mean, the private communities that were hit with storm debris, they had to come together, foot their own bill for debris removal within their communities because it was private property. Neighborhoods in the unincorporated area have worked together collectively to say, hey, we all want to go with this one trash service for residential garbage pickup because we can have a collective, better price. And it's, one day they pick up all the trash there versus 2 or 3 different services coming through on multiple days to get trash. It's just easier and more efficient. And they've kind of leveraged, their kind of community size to collectively bargain. So those independent trash haulers already have knuckle boom trucks. If this is something that is of demand in the county, perhaps instead of us paying a consultant, we just need a show of hands in the unincorporated county how many people would like to do this, and we could kind of pass it off to these individual services and say, here are 2 or 3 different trash services who have knuckle boom trucks, and they'd be happy to talk to you about trash pickup. It shouldn't always fall back on the government to do when there are people out there who do that in the private sector. And I'll close by saying, if it was cost effective and a profitable enterprise, they would already be doing it in the unincorporated county as it is, on top of residential garbage collection.
But I kind of see where, I'm trying to sit here and decipher through this, but I think, even if it's not feasible, what have you, I still think if a commissioner wants to have a sit down to talk with the public works director or what have you, to see to work it out, I think that was the question that Commissioner Edwards had, and somehow or another, I don't know, this thing went south somewhere, but anyway, just a conversation, and like Commissioner Gray says, I don't think we need to spend $36,000 to get somebody to tell us what we already know. It doesn't make sense. But if there's a commissioner, if Commissioner Johnson wants to talk about something, as long as it's talked about respectfully and in a professional way, whether it be here or whether it be up on the 5th floor, then that commissioner should have that opportunity, I think. But it's a way to do everything, and as my pastor said, and that's decent and in order. And that we kind of got that thing where it wasn't decent and in order this morning. But I hope that as we go forward, that we will do things here in front of all of these folks in the world, because we're on Facebook and we're everywhere with what our discussions are. And I say going forward, let's do things decent and in order. And if it looks like we're not going to be able to work it out, let's just hold our tongue. Life and death is in the tongue. So let's just kind of see if we can not be combative, and see if we can kind of hold our tongues and maybe kind of walk away from this thing time and talk about it maybe in the hallway afterwards. But let's not get so out of hand here that that it appears that we are arguing.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. McCoy?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff is asking the board for a direction on a policy issue. And the issue is collection service in the unincorporated area. Unfortunately, Spencer isn't here. He'd go into detail about a lawsuit that we were involved in some time ago that dealt with the broader issue of flow control. At that particular time, the county entered into an agreement with the city of Albany. It's a flow control ordinance. It defined the role of the county, and it defined the role of the city. The county's role, because we own the landfill, we're the disposal agent countywide. The city is the collection agent countywide for debris collection. So when this idea was proposed, This is a policy decision for the board if it wants to provide collection service of yard debris in the unincorporated area, which would require you guys to set a policy, to set a budget aside. We don't have the expertise in order to present to you a recommendation. We don't have a recommendation. We want your guidance on whether or not you want to get in the disposal or the collection business for yard debris countywide. And so right now we know for a fact that we are short-staffed like everyone else. In all of our departments, there's a labor shortage. And so going to a consultant, it would tell us how many staff members we would need. They would evaluate the demand in the unincorporated area. They would do a deep dive, an evaluation, research, everything that needs to be researched, and come back with your options if you want to move forward with collection services in the unincorporated area, however you want to do that. Schedule monthly or on call or whatever other maybe hybrid option there is. I don't know what they are. I'm not in that business.
You're just asking if the board has an appetite to even pursue this?
Yes, that's it. And that's coming from Commissioner Edwards, you know. So if the
And
board,
that was it.
it's a
It
policy
was
decision.
going back to what Commissioner Jones said. We could have sat in upstairs and talked about this. But like I asked the chairman, when we're talking sometime with staff, the sarcasm come out. And so that's why we're here. But we could have sat upstairs. We could have came over to your office and sat down and said, hey man, look at all of these angles, and we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Real simple.
All right.
We don't need no consultant. I mean, it's kind of so simple. The problem was we did not have the conversation. I was cut off when I was saying, hey, let's have a conversation. And going back to what I said earlier, when we're not trying to impose our powers or whatever, I know who I am. So it's like, hey, let's talk about it. And that's all I ever be wanting to do. And if it don't make sense to me, just like the chairman say, we know half of it. If we have the agreement with the city, why is the city, the amount, maybe sometime I think it's like $100 that they charge to come out. But it was just a discussion. We shouldn't even be having this little piece right here. And Reverend Commissioner Jones, I respect what you say with the way we are, but then when we word things that's not worded correctly, I'm gonna stop you. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the County Administrator and Mr. Scott.
All right, very well. Well, thank you for the information that we got and the discussion that we were trying to have. If there are any other additional discussions that Commissioner Edwards would like to have with the chairman, I'd be happy to do that.
Where
We're
do
gonna
we
move
leave
on.
this item, Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry?
Where are we leaving this item?
I think we're going to leave this for some communication later on. We're going to move on to the next item. Discussion of the proposed ARP spending plan. Mr. McCoy.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, we are delighted to be here. We promised that we'd get this to you at this time, and here we are. This is a custom tailored plan for Dougherty County, and you will find statewide that we're probably ahead of a lot of local governments because they are waiting until the guidelines are finalized, and there are a lot of proposed changes that are being considered in Congress right now, which may give us more flexibility with these dollars. But before we get started, I want to thank all of our department managers, all of our elected officials that participated in this process, and in particular, our executive team, which consisted of our HR director, our finance director, assistant finance director, our assistant county administrator, and most importantly, our able consultant, Ms. Cutts with Core Group. You will see, and you'll have presented 3 fiscal years worth of funding recommendations, but we want you to focus on fiscal year 22. That's the fiscal year we're in now. This is a fluid document. This is something that we're going to have to revisit every year, and you all will have to approve the fiscal year budget for this spending plan. So the out years are some of the things we know will definitely be a part of the out years, like the pay raise. And then there are things that we just don't know. We just don't know because, again, the final rules have not been approved, and that may open up opportunities for us. So we're just going to ask that we concentrate on fiscal year 22 today to be approved, maybe next next regular session or sometime in the future. But without further ado, I will turn it over to Ms. Cutts.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Thank you all for the opportunity to be able to come this morning, and it's been a pleasure to be able to work with Mr. McCoy and with his team in terms of us trying to put together a spending plan document to be able to bring before you today. In the documents that you have, which is just a draft document, and I'm going to just kind of cover what I'll go over today. Today's agenda is really number one for us to just kind of hit the highlights again of the Rescue Plan Act for 2021, just so that we can make sure that everyone kind of understands what that is. Then we'll kind of go over just quickly the highlights of the eligible uses of these funds, of the recovery funds. And then we'll talk about spending priorities, which kind of set, in terms of when we looked at the spending plan document, the summary document that you have, a lot of that came from these spending priorities, and we kind of wanted to make sure that we were clear what those priorities are. And then at the bottom it says that we're going to look at future considerations for 23 through 24. And as Mr. McCoy just mentioned, that document that you have, it actually shows some recommendations in terms of proposed spending, those costs. These are things that we know will carry over for 23 and 24, and just making sure that everyone has kind of an account of what those costs are. So what is the American Recovery Plan Act? Of course, that was signed into law in March of 2021 by Congress. The president signed it on March the 11th. And then also it includes the state and local fiscal recovery funds. So the funding that this money actually came from is from the American Rescue Plan Act. And then in terms of what the money is to be used for, then we're going to kind of get into that a little bit on the next slide, where we talk about eligible uses for the $65.1 billion of direct aid that's coming to county governments for rescue and recovery efforts. So of course, the number one thing is to support public health response. And then the second one is to be able to address the negative economic impacts, and then to replace public sector revenue loss, and then premium pay for eligible, and the key being eligible essential workers, and then to invest in water, sewer, and then also in broadband. This is a chart, and we're not going to go over this, but I just kind of wanted to be able to share it because it is kind of key in terms of when some of the counties are required to, based on their size, they're required to do a specific report that they actually have to submit to the U.S. Treasury. But this is a really good guiding document because it takes all of those categories and it kind of breaks them down and shows you some of the eligible expenses under each one of those areas, under those key categories. This is not an all-inclusive list, but it does kind of show the highlights of what some of those expenditures are. And this is something that can really be helpful because when you're, as a government, when you're making a decision about whether or not these are eligible expenses, but also if you provide any of your funding to other agencies and you're wanting to make sure for reporting and other requirements that they are meeting those things, this is the way how you check of whether or not these things are actually eligible. So just kind of setting the stage for the spending plan that we're going to present to you, I just kind of wanted to go back and just capture under USAID facts. It talks about that, prior to this money coming, all county, local, other state governments, they had to respond. We know that in Dougherty County, based on how hard we were hit with COVID here, and we look at how government had to be out front and actually do and spend a lot of money to be able to respond to COVID, right? So all of those expenses, those are things that money was not available for right away. And so these things, of course, put a strain on local government. And so you're looking at counties and cities and the money that they actually had to spend up front, retrofitting buildings, being able to have safe practices in place, and to be able to do a lot of the things that were done. Those expenses were incurred up front. So it says government has entered unprecedented times, and basically some of the things, the costs that were incurred at that time, I think it's really important to note that after money was paid, the money that has been provided after the fact, one of the things that's allowed is to be able to cover some of those expenses or to be able to make the government whole again for some of those expenses that were incurred and to make those allowable expenses going forward because the pandemic is not over. There's still costs to be incurred. There's still costs that are being incurred. And this would affect the government's ability to be able to provide those essential services that it is in the business of providing. So in terms of spending priorities, one of the things that, if you'll note on here for priority 1, it says administration. So under administration, we're basically talking about Dougherty County government. Dougherty County government operations, that's the #1 priority, is making sure that Dougherty County government has what it needs in terms of resources financially to be able to continue to provide those essential services. And then #2, the item on there is departments. So of course, that's again, being able to provide that public-facing service delivery. Those things are the second priority for this spending plan. So it's looking at internal operations, internal services, and making sure that money is properly allocated to be able to continue to provide those services. And then of course, third is working with community partner agencies, looking at critical community impact and critical community needs, right? So there are some things that were explicitly spelled out in this particular guidance that actually talked about businesses were hit hard. We know that. We know that healthcare was hit hard. We know that in terms of behavioral and other health-related issues, those are things that there's been kind of major issues related to those. And there's a lot of mention in terms of making sure that when you obligate money that you're looking at those critical needs first and making sure that if you obligate and work with community partners, that those are some of the types of services that you consider, So those are the 3 priority areas that were considered when we put this actual document together. So in terms of the plan, in that book that you have, there should be a draft document that's a full version that I think I put on the page where these actual documents are. And what I'd like to do is just kind of walk through the actual expenses that are on there. And again, going back to the priorities, the way that this budget or this spending plan is broken down, it actually starts with priority 1, looking at administration. And of course, working with the finance director and working with other HR director and others, we look specifically at the costs that had already been, the costs that have actually been incurred related to these things, and these are ongoing expenses. So you'll note that under premium pay, public safety, so this is for the general fund, $2.5 million or $2,546.58. That's the proposed cost for fiscal year 22. Premium pay for public safety, and then these are special services, $406,362. These are expenses that these are what they are. There's no way to change these, so they're on here for that reason. And then the next is you have $50,000 budgeted for consultants, so various services that may have to be provided in terms of providing assistance. So $50,000 for that. And then employee vaccination incentives. These are programs that you all have already approved, and those have been provided for employees, so $300,000 for that. And then the incentive-based COVID vaccine event, and I think these have been very successful events, and we know that in terms of dealing with COVID, that vaccinations and events like these to be able to get people vaccinated is going to be critical to being able to turn the corner on COVID-19. So $550,000 is budgeted for that. And I think there was already an amount that was approved by this board to be able to address it.
Yeah, it's 338.
338.
But we bumped it up because we moved to a third program. When we originally came, we asked for 2.
Hold on 1 second. Now, they asked to do a third one, but we didn't ask to increase the budget for a third one.
No, we said we would come back once we once the program is approved.
Yes, sir.
Then we will go forward and then come back with a ratified budget request.
But we do still have funds from the 338 first approval, correct?
We're still reconciling those costs because when we initially made that budget, I will tell we've never done this before, and so there were expenses associated with that program that we didn't consider. So they were not a part of the proposed budget. So it's likely that, you know, we could be over, we could be under.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Yes.
you know,
Commissioner Gaines?
yes, thanks. I think what we did was sit here and count the money that would be given. You remember the calculation you
Yeah.
were doing? But I did not realize, or we, all of the costs. When I saw it on the ground, I knew we were spending far more money than we were giving out. We kind of saw it as the money we were giving out, therefore we were going to have a lot of money available to give our citizens and to put in circulation. But there are costs out there that I was not aware
The
of.
operational costs.
Yes, that I was not aware of.
It wasn't just a,
So, yeah, so I've asked as well, and I'd love to see what it is we're paying for. I don't really know what all we're paying for.
Yes, so for instance, we paid for marketing to iHeartRadio. We had to pay our volunteers, staff, and then the second event we had to scale up, so we needed more staff, and we paid them overtime because due to the Fair Labor Standards Act, you can't have your employees work for you and not pay them. And so that was a huge expense. We had catering expenses. We had there were other costs that the
Yeah,
restroom.
well, what I'm saying is we just, we don't know, but
Yeah.
it would be very helpful to this body to
Yes.
know what those costs were.
Yeah, and we're going to bring that to you. We just haven't finished getting all of our invoices in.
And I think the other part is that this is the proposed, considering the initial amount, but also
The
you're
third.
you're budgeting for the third event.
Yeah.
as well.
Commissioner Edwards is next.
Yeah, and I agree with Commissioner Gaines. I guess all the logistics, like the T-shirts and everything like
Yes,
that.
sir.
But now I think you have a true idea, because you've already, you've already kind of, you know the tent, you know the logistics of it, where that's what you didn't have in the beginning.
Yes.
So now you got that. So I think you have a better call, even with the booster shot, if we go forward with that.
Yes.
So, because I was thinking like that, I was like, well, okay, we just only paying the people that's getting shot, and then you see the tents and you see the flag, like, okay.
All right, very good. Any other comments or questions?
Yes, ma'am, she's on the
Ms. Cutts had some more.
Family First Corona.
Yes, and I think, I guess, you know, without going through line by line, what we have here is if you look at all the administrative costs, these are actually costs that are being incurred. And most of these costs, they're not inflated costs. These are costs that are all eligible, and these are all costs that should be budgeted, with the exception of, I would like to go down to technology, because one of the allowable expenses is understanding that having to move to a remote kind of environment in response to COVID, of course. One of the things is that making sure that staff have the laptops and other technology that's required. So we looked specifically at laptops, we looked at software, and then also it was radios was another kind of key expense that were required to be able to provide the services that were needed. So that $756,077, that amount came from, these are, I guess, kind of information that was provided by all of the departments, but it was for those three specific costs. So it was for computers, it was for software, and it was for radios. So it was kind of limited to those three things, and there is a supporting spreadsheet that has kind of a breakdown of what those costs are. And then the last thing that's on here is broadband. So the 20% match requirement, there's a $15 million cost for the application that's being submitted to the state for recovery funds for broadband, and the county match for that is $1 million. So when you total that for fiscal year 22, the administrative cost would be $7.4 million. And then if you look at out of the first tranche of the $17 million that the county is getting, the first tranche was $8.5 million, or just a little bit over 8.5. So you have the 8.5 less the 7.4. There still remains money that can be obligated for fiscal year 22. And if you go to page 2, that shows requests were made from the DA's office and from the public library, and then also from the health department. And these were project-specific requests. So the DA's office, there was evidence-based provided to be able to show that there was an increase in gun violence.
significant increase. There's a backlog of being able to handle those cases. And so a pilot program is being recommended by the DA's office, and the estimated cost to be able to deliver that is $250,000. Some of the supporting documentation is actually included in the information that you have. And then there is the public library, so a mobile library unit, being able to purchase that. And of course, we all know that with libraries, we have a lot of areas within Dougherty County where there are areas where kids are were not able to be able to do their schoolwork. You have a lot of low-income households that needed access to the internet, and so the library is that source. And this mobile library kind of would put the library in a position to be able to address those needs. And also, it's my understanding that the West Town Library is going to be closing, or they're going to be going under renovation.
Yes, great point. This library on wheels will allow us to continue to provide library services in the West Town area. That is expected to close for some extended period due to renovations. And this mobile library will have Wi-Fi capabilities, so the kids in the community or patrons in that community will be able to still have all the services that they would if the brick and mortar library were still open. Yes.
Yeah, excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Commissioner Edwards.
Yeah, but now dealing with the mobile library,
Yes.
the school system provided, all the kids now have a computer. All, I think the last number I had was like 17,000 people. So the school system provided, everybody now has a computer, and have even they added more, what you call hotspots to those computers. So now, I guess I want to back up with Ms. Cut. Now, this 950,000 under that we had left, what was that balance that we had? Right now, the F-22, we operating, this is just that first 8 million that we got, right?
Yes.
Now, what's that balance? I know Clinton and Russell already did it.
So if you go to the third page,
Okay.
so the next page on there shows you at the bottom in yellow, there's $123,157 that remains that can be obligated to the third priority.
So I'm saying all of that, out of that 8 we have now,
Yes,
if we did this first list,
yes,
we only gonna have that $123,000 left out of 8 million.
that's correct.
And be over budget by $2 million.
The over budget is based on if we, at the
Continue.
numbers that you see in there, and if you include 23 and 24, those expenses that need to happen, as well as the request from the community, that's what you would be over. But remember, we're only, right now, we're asking for
22.
your consideration for fiscal year 22. But we wanted to make sure that you saw those ongoing expenses that were directly related to administrative costs for priority 1 area as well as priority 2.
So eligibility reference number 1 for DA's office, is that right? Is it number 1, number 3?
So the eligibility reference is that chart that I showed you earlier when I was talking about the impact, when you talk about how it's eligible, it's based on that. It's not based on
Can you
the priority.
Can you send us that list of all the eligibility categories?
Yes, absolutely. And
My question is, so I'm clear, so the gun violence is falling under number 1 or number 3?
so the gun violence, President Biden, after the signage of ARP, because violence increased nationwide, said, hey, you can use this money in your court system to deal with the increased violence associated with the pandemic.
Correct?
Yes. And so that's how we're tying in the DA's request.
I guess what I'm pointing to is we were going to give $250,000 to the DA for gun violence, but he ain't presented his budget just yet. It's just a proposal.
He presented a proposal and an estimated cost of what it would take to be able to operate that, and what he's calling it is a pilot program, because one of the key factors to consider for this is whether or not there are ongoing costs. And so if you're funding something that
requires operational costs beyond 22 and 23. How is that program going to be sustained after that? But it's also important to note that one of the things they really want to make sure with this funding is that when you fund something, that it is directly tied to COVID. It is a problem that was presented because of COVID, or there were additional expenses that were incurred because of COVID, and you're addressing those things.
And so, and let me preference, now my district is all in the city. Whoever that know that, my district is all in the city. Let me preference with my statements. So my thoughts are a little bit different. I push for a very, very strong county. So what I'm going with this is, I see where this possible $250,000 for gun control is maybe in the court system, but what are we using for community safeguarding? Because there are victims of these gun violence. There are children that are victims. There are lots of youth programs that could benefit. So I see where we're doing the $250,000 for the court system.
Sure.
What are we doing for those youth programs that were they asked? I mean, like who contacted these people and asked for a proposal rather than contact somebody else and ask for a proposal? I don't understand that process.
Yes, sir. So we reached out internally, and let me back up and frame our presentation. The ARP money, it took a lot of effort for them to get this passed, and the economy was shut down. And one of the key talking points was, hey, governments are going to lose revenue because you shut the economy down, and we know due to COVID that their expenses are going to go up, having to respond to this pandemic, and their revenue is going down. What can the federal government do to help these governments sustain themselves until this pandemic is over? So they came up with this ARP money. So our priority is about making sure that we stabilize the county's financial position. We're already at a $6 million budget deficit. You all have approved a pay raise for public safety. You all may approve next week a pay study, which is going to continue to drive up your expenses. And so our priority is about making sure that you use this money for operations to get you to 2024 in a stronger, if not a stronger position, but certainly not a weaker position that you're in now. So that's why we only have $125,000 available that's discretionary, if you will. Of course, you can move this money around however you want to. But we looked internally, we reached out to the police chief, we reached out to the judges and health insurance. We didn't have COVID expenses in our health plan before 2020. And that could potentially be an ongoing thing. And you all know we paid almost $2 million and
Increase.
that we're going to have to pay for when this ARP money.
And I'll make one more comment, and I'll turn it over.
Mr. Johnson.
And I'll turn it over. We're gonna have to look at property taxes going forward. We have to pay these premium. We have to bring our employees up. We have to be fair, and so it's gonna come back down in this 24, 25, whatever possible property taxes. So I would have liked to see us use the money to generate money. And if that is sir?
No.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. To generate funds. So if there's a way that we could have did a revolving loan fund or done something in the community where there's a 1 or 2, 3% return. I know interest rates are low, but put us in a position where we get money coming back to us.
I don't think we can use any of this for any type of investment.
We proposed that. So we reached out to
Albany Community Together.
Okay.
And we were proposing $500,000 grants for small businesses. The problem is right now for 22, now maybe 23 and 24, money may be available to fund these types of programs. But for 22, we're kind of tight. We only have $125,000 for discretionary projects.
Understood.
Yeah.
All right, Commissioner Johnson.
I'm done, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, Commissioner Gray or Commissioner Gaines?
I just want to agree with Commissioner Johnson that, my biggest concern is these are going to end up being unfunded mandates on the county in 2024 and beyond. So when we look at millage rate, we look at budgets, we obviously can't count this money toward our budgets because we're using this money for it, which is supplemental income. When we look at raising pay, if we do that on a countywide basis, that is something that we're going to have to budget for. But we can't include the premium pay raises and the back pay rates that we're paying now in that, because that's coming through ARP. So if we looked at it strictly on a budget basis, you're looking at a millage increase to get where we need to be without this money. But obviously what happens if this payroll study comes back and the recommendation for pay is less than what people are making through this premium addition to their pay? Does that make sense?
Yes, sir. So with that study, they're going to drill down and use real-time information.
Okay.
So it likely will be at what they're getting paid, if not higher, but certainly not less.
Yes.
All right, Commissioner Gaines.
Yeah. I think your preference was much needed, or your framework, Mr. McCoy, was much needed. And that is that we needed to stabilize our budget during these uncertain times. But the problem I have is that I have no idea, because it's never really been presented to us, how exactly the budget has been impacted by COVID. I can't even visualize in my head how it's been impacted. I know intuitively that it has been, but I don't have it in figures, I don't know how much the insurance went up. I don't know how COVID affected it. I haven't seen it in any facts and figures. I don't know whether this is exactly what it is or around what it is or what. I don't know how much revenue we lost that we can attribute to COVID, because I've never seen any of this stuff. And it's not even reflected here. I don't know how much revenue we lost in sales tax or in, I don't think our digest didn't go down. I don't know about our fines over here and fees in the judicial system. I don't really know because I've never seen it. And whether or not, to me, that is the priority, to try to recover any losses we experienced on the revenue side and on the expense side in our budget. That is priority.
I want to comment, Commissioner Gaines. Now, on the sales tax, I think we actually gained on that one. But during the budget process...
Did we? I haven't seen that.
During the budget process, we talked about the losses, though, from court fees and some other stuff. It was a lot. It was just a lot of information at one time. But we talked about... I think we budgeted for less because we lost a lot of court fees from not having court all of 2020.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was asking. What are
You want to see the number.
I haven't seen them.
Yeah.
And I think if Mr. Chairman, if I may, I was going to
Yes,
say,
ma'am.
and maybe in terms of a final report for that, because that is something that we started having, we again, the finance department, HR department have been a direct part of this process. So these numbers, like the health plan COVID costs, even up until, I think it was even on Friday, this was the most recent number. It's like within dollars of what the health plan COVID costs are. So this $1.5 million, this is a real number, even not just coming from HR, but also calling in to make sure that this number was accurate. So that's why even that spreadsheet coming to you later was because we were trying to make sure that these were the best numbers that we could actually provide. But we could provide a comprehensive document that shows all of those expenses.
So you think that we have captured all of our costs?
The ones that are eligible to be able to, because not every single cost, I mean, you can't.
Associated with COVID.
Right. So these are the ones that are eligible. Now, once with lost revenue, that there's a lot more kind of flexibility with that. But for year one, the number that was calculated was not
significant, so there was not enough there to be able to get, so we're hoping that for year 2. And remember, he told you, Mr. McCoy said that this number would, I guess in terms of this document, that this would be like a living, breathing document. We would make amendments to it because it could possibly, for year 2, it could change. And we're hoping for a lost revenue for year 2, that if there is a larger number that can be used, there'll be more flexibility in how that funding can be used. But these are based on what's eligible.
So for this year, you think you've captured it?
I think that this is, for up until now, this is a real,
Yes, ma'am.
these are real numbers.
We did a comprehensive scrub. I mean, we worked long and hard.
Okay.
We've checked our numbers. This is the best data that we have. We would say, based on this presentation and this spreadsheet, the budget has been impacted by at least, our budget has gone up by about $5.5 million.
In revenue?
No, in
costs.
expenses. Expenses. And a lot of that has to do with the pay raises for public safety.
Yeah.
So you see that's almost $3 million.
Okay. And on the revenue side, it has...
Well, we were talking to our financial advisor, and he's on vacation now. But we will be coming back to you as we give you our mid-year budget update, and we'll have a better idea of the financial impact to our budget relative to these ARP dollars. But,
So,
yes.
okay, so we can pay for priority 1, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Year 2022,
Yes,
right?
ma'am.
And priority 2?
Yes, ma'am.
And what about 3?
And I guess 3 was the consideration of how best to handle that, because you have requests that are significantly higher than what you have available.
Yes, and so,
So
we have
we can pay for priorities 1 and 2 for FY '22 with $950,000 left.
No, with 125,000.
125.
Yes, ma'am. 123, 157. On the last page at the bottom, it's highlighted on the right.
Oh, 123, okay.
Yes, ma'am. So if you take that 123, you can go back to other considerations on page 2. So you'll see commissioners' recommendations. There's no budget or proposed cost there because we don't know how much that would cost. And then, of course, you have the priority 3, the community partner agencies, and so you could fund either one of those, or you can come up with something that you may have in mind that may be eligible with the 125. Now, again, we're going to go through this process again at the end of the fiscal year because we'll know whether or not we got approved for the broadband project, and if we didn't, that's $1 million that'll be freed up that could potentially be used in 23.
Just as a small, I'm sorry, Katrina.
Commissioner Gaines?
Small point of reference. Now, on the budget for the health department, it comes to $206,800, but in the overall request is $300,000.
Yes, sir. We moved that up because of COVID, the COVID effect. We over budgeted to make sure that they have enough funding.
Contingency, if you will.
Yes, contingency, because they don't have a mobile clinic that they can use in the community, and that's very important that they have that as a resource for the community. And so we wanted to make sure that we budgeted enough money so we wouldn't have to come back to you if their numbers were off.
How much of this stuff, or is there any of this that can be moved into the possible $1 trillion, $2 trillion infrastructure plan? Is there anything in here that can fall up under that next tranche of money?
The potential, the broadband.
Broadband is the only one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, but also look at, broadband is critical because if you're going to dedicate money to buying laptops and mobile access for remote employees, if they don't have broadband, it doesn't matter.
Agreed.
And so I think if we have to put we have to double down on broadband infrastructure throughout our entire county for many reasons, but most importantly, we saw that children and/or employees are useless at home with a laptop that doesn't have good connectivity or any at all.
And it just brings dollars in. It brings in a ton of dollars. And there are a large number of people that I've seen, I mean, right, and I know some of my commissioners probably know this better than others, but the real estate market right now is insane. Like, it's absolutely insane. And there's no shortage of people that are buying up houses to live in right now either. And a lot of those folks work from home on a laptop while they're drinking a cup of coffee in their pajamas, you know, just running their office from there. So that brings in a lot of dollars. Very good presentation. Do we have any other comments or questions?
I got one more comment,
Mr. Johnson.
I'm sorry.
No, don't apologize.
And I don't want you to take this because my district lost a lot over the last census numbers, and housing is important to building the community. And so I would like to see us look at how do we expand housing, how do we expand homes, how do we get involved in that effort, because the percentage of people that are leaving my district are going because of the blight flight. And so, and if we don't replace housing, if we don't replace multifamilies, if we don't replace that stuff, population steady dwindles in that area, and I'll be all in Grays and Jones district trying to get constituents. So,
What if we could do tiny houses?
that's a good one.
Yeah, well, I think you're right. We have some opportunities out there to begin to address the housing issue, how we keep population here.
Right.
You know, provide good housing in a good environment. And there are a lot of things we are not doing as a community to do that. And that's a discussion for another day. But I don't know what we can do to seed that. If there's something in here we can do to seed that in here. We certainly can't make it happen with this.
Absolutely
money.
right.
But is there anything in here that we can seed? And I would look to next year rather than this year, because I think we'd have to be creative about what we do. And we have not been creative
What if,
yet.
and it's just off the top of my head, you know, I see this, you know, Albany Community Together, small businesses.
Right.
We're the county. Most of the small businesses are in the city. So what if we took like $500,000 there and put it into an organization that could, through proposals from property owners, help to fix up some of these more dilapidated properties? That would help solve our blight problem, because, you know, a lot of times it's just not, from a business perspective, cost effective to invest in a piece of real estate that's barely making any money.
Okay,
So if there's money to be had to fix up our real estate stock for either, you know, rental properties or either single family homeowners that just don't have the capital to go put a new roof on or go paint or upgrade something in their house.
Can we, just a matter of discussion, can we set aside, say, $500,000, squeeze it out of somewhere? I think we only have 123 left over, and just identify that as some kind of housing seed or you said business.
Yeah, I mean, you know, whether you look at business.
A revolving loan repair fund is.
Something like that,
Yeah.
And
Repair
set that
and
aside,
recovery.
pull it out of, squeeze it out of here somehow. And because we do need an initiative that is not run-of-the-mill kind of, and I agree that our priority is to stabilize the budget, but as you notice, I think that we do need to start this partnership as well. Those are my two important things to do.
And to that point, with COVID, when you have our family dynamic, where you can have a grandparent, children, and one parent, or whatever, however you look at it, they're all using that one bathroom, they're all using that one place, so that kind of spreading people out a little bit more kind of helps. And so getting into housing and helping people expand those families a little bit.
If we could set aside that $500,000, now, I don't know about it going to, what is it, Albany?
Community?
Communities together? I don't know. I don't know much about them, but.
Or perhaps we set up our own program with that money so that the county can subsidize business owners who will go help invest in, either qualified, dilapidated, or, aging housing.
Mr. Chairman.
Unfortunately, we don't have that capability in-house, and so we would
Yeah,
have to find.
it's gotta be a
City might.
partnership. It's
Yeah.
gotta be a partnership. But I don't know who that partner is the question. Is my question.
On the housing side?
Well, I
Are
think,
you asking?
I think
Yes.
but I think you can probably explain, because I'm familiar with ag, so I think you probably would explain a little bit.
I mean,
better.
in terms of working with
Yeah.
small businesses, and I think that the services that they provide are probably not, people take for granted, I guess, the level of service that they provide, because there's a lot of businesses that people may not even know that they've actually helped.
Right.
But working with small businesses, providing those services, being able to assess those buildings, provide them access to capital, they have very strong relationships with the banks. They have money themselves that they can actually leverage against the money that's provided by the county. So I think that ACT is probably in one of the best positions to be able to help those small businesses. They're CDFI, which provides them with a wealth of other kind of access to resources. So I think that in terms of small businesses, and this is just me personally, because in working with community development and working with the city, I've worked with them directly on a number of programs. They were a subrecipient of ours, and we've seen nothing but kind of great partnerships with them. So I think that that's just my 2 cents on that. But I was going to ask if it was okay for me to just be able to say that in terms of eligibility, it's also eligible under this funding for if you want to be able to work on a strategy or pay for a strategy to be able to be put together for housing development, business development. That's one of the eligible uses. And with 123 remaining,
You could use that as seed
you
money
could
for
use that as
planning.
seed money for that, to be able to come up with that strategy for those two specific
I'd
programs.
rather set money aside for, the Carlton Construction Academy to have project houses where they go out and upgrade houses, within Albany, and it's a hands-on project.
Something direct. Yeah, so if that's feasible, then we could squeeze out that $500,000 somehow, although we only have 123, right?
Yeah.
If we could squeeze it out and make it $500,000 somehow, and set it aside as seed money to be, and you all would have to come back to us with something specific, though.
Sure, I think, here's what I would suggest, conceptually, I mean, this is just such a strange, I've never seen anything like this, I mean, the federal government's just handing out this massive amounts of money, and you actually have a little bit of normally, when you get stuff from the federal government, it's like you have to spend $5 to utilize that $1. I think this warrants further discussion at a future work session. Could you get us some conceptual proposals, like, what this would look like?
Absolutely.
What are some of the things that we could potentially do? I think that you're hearing from folks, everybody's tired of blight. Everybody's tired of their homes not being fixed up. If there is a way to financially incentivize the removal of blight through these dollars, then perhaps that's something we want to explore. We need to get a little bit more meat on the bone, a little bit more information.
Sure.
Please run down the component of potentially planning dollars with the 123, 157. And let's talk through a menu and get that back before us. If that's what the commission is wanting to do.
I mean,
But I'm sitting here sort of counting in my head folks that I think are on the same page, and that's where I'm.
I mean, if the city's budgeting for blight removal already in their budget, they have access to the same type of money for the same reasons we do. If we all kind of have a unified consensus, then we can put 3 different funding sources behind, one concept. And blight is our biggest problem in our community.
I would think that it would be advisable, and I'm sure Ms. Cutts is going to do this, find out what the city's doing with their money, and we obviously want to talk to them and get some information.
Frankly, if blight drives crime, it could be
They're using their money
tier
for
one.
sewer.
But
They shouldn't call us. That's right. Yeah,
But
that
what
is
this-
true.
Yeah.
What this
I think
means,
every
though,
bit of it's going to the
what
sewer.
this means, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
is that that some adjustment would have to be made in your 22 proposal. So if we could see those numbers together with how we would use that 0.5. Okay?
I think that would be
Yes,
very
ma'am.
good.
One last thing.
Yeah, Commissioner Evans.
Yes, I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. I guess, Ms. Cutts, when I put in about the youth job training apprenticeship, pretty much I was wanting to collaborate with Southwest Georgia Region Commission, because they're the one who operate the job training partnership. It was just seeing what kind of programs, because they usually put out the RFQ, and usually, you know, they fund programs in around the 14 county concepts. Usually they allocate $40,000, $50,000 for so many students. But I'd like to try to, if you could, reach out to them to get pretty much a number, you know, to put in, because it will fit in category 2, you know, because of and I think it all ties back into the gun violence. You're gonna have to do something with kids. I mean, and teenagers, that's just the bottom line. And I like to see us really put a little bit more effort going toward that. I mean, I think we've kind of stepped out of the box, and I appreciate our county commissioner stepping out of the box, doing a lot of things, more things in the city limits. So again, that's why I bought that, because we look at the different things, the jobless rate, teenagers going back to work, but they have different vices now that I didn't have. All I worried about was a skateboard or a bicycle for Christmas. So now I think we gotta come out of the box a little bit more to put teenagers to work and start training them and placing them. So if we could, you know, reach out to, you know, Southwest Georgia Commission and see what's the average grant program that they offer. Because if you would. And I'll look at that along with what I've already been directed. I think we just have to, for workforce development in general, is not eligible, just regular workforce development. You have to tie it has to be tied to COVID. You have to demonstrate that it ties back to COVID. So if there's, you know, in an underserved area, youth group, so we'll look specifically at that as well.
I'm one of them guys that who just look at, it's some flexibility if we really try hard and look hard. This is new to all of us, and somehow them 7 categories, somehow they continue to came about. So I know it's a way, and I don't know if Mr. Chairman would think about it, that ACT, you know, because then ACT can actually explain to us exactly their functions, you know, a little bit better.
Yeah, but I think grounding all this, though, we've got to remember what Mr. McCoy said, is that this is to help the county recover unbudgeted expenses and loss of revenue. We know we're in a $6 million budgetary deficit, so, you know, the more new stuff we add with this money or do with this money that doesn't work to fix our budget and help us from a long-term cost management perspective, we're going to, you know, 2024 is going to be a pretty rough year.
Right.
So, you know, we have, you know, a gift from the heavens with this money. If we apply it correctly, we'll be much better off long-term than doing a lot of cool things with the money now and being in a weaker financial position in 5, 6, 7, 8 years.
All right. Agreed. So let's, very good points, very good presentation, Ms. Cutts. We're going to move on. Thank you. All right. Mr. Lee is not here today. Mr. McCoy, do you have anything?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman, a point of clarification. There's only one drop box location per Senate Bill 202. The drop boxes cannot be located outside of a building. Surveillance cameras are no longer required. The drop box is located in the elections office and can only be opened during the advance voting time frame.
I thought that was the case.
Yeah. He said 2, I was surprised too.
I was too.
Didn't we have 3?
We had 6,
We
but
did,
state
but
law
they-
changed everything.
They cut all of that.
202 changed it all.
So they're in the closet.
Yep,
Yeah, they cut all that.
that's right.
All right.
Can't find them.
Very good. Commissioner Gaines.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. 2 points. For our next event, vaccine event, which is scheduled for what, November?
November 6th.
November 6th?
Yes, ma'am.
I would ask you to please be as fair as you can to all of our citizens, because quite a few of them have Moderna. So if it's possible to have a provider for Moderna, please try.
Yes.
And the second thing, addressed to the commission, please, and to you in particular, Commissioner Gray, is that I am quite ready to work with you or anyone else on this commission or in this community to talk about, to begin the discussion of aesthetic quality. How do we look better than we do? How do we do it with the built environment? How do we do it with the natural environment? I think we need to start with our buildings and our codes and build in some aesthetic quality. So I would ask that our planning department, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
look closely at how we can improve what our buildings look like, what the built environment looks like. You need to have some minimum standards of aesthetic quality.
Okay. Sounds like a good discussion.
So if they could come to us with something, I would be grateful.
Yes, ma'am.
I got a comment to that now. We have a 3rd vaccine event already planned, but do we have it already funded?
That is true.
Right.
Is it funded already?
It's in this number.
Yes, it's in the number.
It's in this $550,000. We have to approve first. And this is just a draft right here. You have to come back before us again to tell us the amount that you're requesting for the 3rd event, right?
Not necessarily. So what we could do next week, we can put it on the agenda to approve the
Additional.
3rd vaccination event.
Without knowing the cost.
Yeah, well, and you could approve the $550,000
We could do it on
amended budget.
All we're doing is raising the budget on it.
No, I'm rejecting it. I didn't vote for it the first time. I'm coming back again saying the same thing. I'm not changing my vote. I'm in the same, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
I'm in the same place. I don't want to put any, but I want to put any more money towards
Yes, sir.
people doing the right thing. I mean, that's my,
Yeah.
you know my standpoint, so I'm not,
Yeah, that's a board decision.
well, I'm just
Well, I
saying,
think
you got to
his
come
point,
back.
Logistically,
All right, hold on.
if we don't fund it, it doesn't need to happen.
Yeah.
No, this will be
Right.
additional.
Yeah. Commissioner Johnson, go ahead.
Yeah, we have not put money into doing the 3rd event. There is a request to do the 3rd event. I was not for the 1st or the 2nd event, so I won't be for the 3rd one, but it has to be approved, and I want to make sure that my vote says no to funding this again.
Right, I agree with you. If it doesn't get funded, we don't need to have it on the calendar.
Yes, sir. Agreed.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm done.
All right, so hold on a second. What was
Use on gains.
that? Commissioner Gaines, did you have anything else?
No, but if it requires funding, then let's do it.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Johnson.
No, sir. Oh, I do have one more thing. We were supposed to get back the amount that the industrial park at Georgia Pacific sold for to Georgia Pacific. We were supposed to get that back to for the PDA. The deal, how long it's in abatement, and how much did they actually purchase that industrial park for the 152 acres for? Y'all don't recall that?
Don't remember that. I'm not saying it didn't happen.
Well, Mr.
We can
Chairman-
get that information very quickly.
Yes, sir. I would like.
Ms. Dyke could get that for you.
Okay, I would like to know how much we sold the industrial park for to Georgia Pacific.
It was, I
know
don't
it's
remember off the top of
10
my head, but I'll tell you it was good for us.
So, and my other question, so that money goes to the PDA, but Dougherty County owned the property? Do we get a portion of that?
No, the Payroll Development Authority bought, purchased, and developed the property. My recollection is, I think Georgia Pacific bought it completely. I could be wrong. Because normally you have like a land lease where you get the abatement. But no, I think there is a land lease where we still have it. And
It's land lease.
It's a 10-year abatement,
10
if I
year.
remember correctly.
That part is correct.
Sorry, my brain's trying to, but I think after 10 years, it may be their own property after that.
Yes, sir.
But they also paid a fair amount too, so.
That's right.
10%.
We can get that information. All right,
Okay.
very good.
Thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner
That's
Johnson?
it, Commissioner, Mr.
Very
Chairman.
good. Commissioner Newsom?
Nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Commissioner Jones?
Enough done been said.
Commissioner Edwards?
Yeah, just like to go back to the vaccination shot. Like to see that dollar amount that we're gonna allocate, because that was where I was with, because if you're doing the 550,000, then you're gonna come back and ask for another 5. That's gonna continue to decrease that FY22, and that was really my whole stance, wanting to know. So I like to see that figure also, and we actually vote on it. You know,
Okay,
what we're gonna be spending.
all right. Mr. McCoy, can you give us some information on that?
Yes, sir, we'll have that on the agenda for
agenda.
you all to react to next Monday.
Okay, good, thank you. All right, Commissioner Gray?
Just a thought on the vaccination event. With the operational costs, is it possible to have one of the public health partners that provides the vaccines at vaccine events handle that aspect of it, so we're not having to pay for the labor to do that? It cuts down on our labor costs. And is there any way to look at that?
Commissioner, we had over 60 volunteers.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big operation. And our inoculators, the clinicians, they are taking care of the cost
Yes.
of the vaccine and
Gotcha.
also the clinical aspect of
Right.
it. But it's a huge other operation
Amazing.
associated with.
Yeah,
the-
just a
the
thought,
event.
question answered. We're
But we're
good.
going to put that on the agenda.
All
Love
right,
it, brother.
very good. Thank you. We're adjourned.